Okay, Steve, do we have anything to report back from the closed session?
Yes, Mayor. The City Council is in closed session this evening, conference with legal counsel on existing litigation, and there's no action to report.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, Mayor. Mondo, can you do me a favor, close that door, please, because I hear an echo. Thank you. Sorry, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mike. Okay, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. Roll call, please. Councilmember Singleton?
Here.
Payne? Present. Campion?
Here.
Cruz?
Here.
Howard? Here. Okay, we've already done public comment, so now we're going to go to public comment again. You want to read it, or? Under Government Code Section 54954.3, members of the public may address the council on non-agenda items. Speakers may address council on any agenda item during consideration of the item. Speakers shall restrict their comments to issues that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the City Council and limit comments to a maximum of 3 minutes. Please fill out a speaker sheet located on the table inside the entrances to the council chambers and forward the completed speaker sheet to the city clerk. So we need to say the Pledge of Allegiance. Everyone please stand. I'm going to pick on the new guy to lead us.
Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And would you please read the video statement, Liz? Because we are going to be on video now, we've been informed. This meeting of the Galt City Council is being videotaped in its entirety and will be cablecast without interruption on Metro Cable 14, the Government Affairs channel on the Comcast and SureWest cable systems. Tonight's meeting can be seen on Channel 14 and will also be webcast at www.saxmetrocable.tv this Thursday, May 30th at 1 p.m. and Saturday, June 1st at 1 p.m. Tonight's meeting can also be seen via live video streaming on the city's website at www.ci.galt.ca.us. A DVD copy is also available for checkout from any library branch. Members of the audience wishing to address council should fill out a speaker identification form and give it to the clerk. Please speak into the microphone when addressing council and state your name for the record. And I have no speakers. Okay. It's such a fascinating subject. We have no speakers. Okay. The recommended 2012-2017 capital improvement project budget adjustments. And it's to you, Jason.
All right. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. It's my pleasure to present two presentations for you this evening. The first is the update to the capital improvement program for fiscal year 2012 to 2017. Second presentation will be about the update to the biannual budget. We have our crack team of budget experts out here in the audience that I'm sure will be able to answer any questions that the council might have. I intend to kind of go through the presentation, but it's informal, so if the council would like to interrupt at any point during the presentation, feel free to jump in, ask questions. At the end, there'll also be another opportunity to ask questions, so, fire away, and we'll do our best to answer any questions that you might have. And then the recommendation at the end will be that the council provide any additional changes, direction. We'll come back. We're not asking you to adopt these documents this evening. We will bring them back for adoption at the next council meeting next week.
Okay.
So having said that, see if I can maneuver this presentation here. You can see up on the slide here, we've got some pictures of some of our recent and upcoming CIP projects. On the right, top right, is our Central Galt interchange. That's the drawing. We've actually got the real thing up now. We've got the landscaping project that's going to be out to bid later this year to finish that off. Up on the top left is one of the architectural features in the roundabouts that we just opened the bids last week. We'll be coming back to the council shortly with a recommendation to award that contract. And the bottom one is a design that we've been working on for improvements down at the railroad property in C Street and 4th Street. So we are working on the environmental and design on that project. So some exciting things coming up. So this presentation is all about the capital projects that the city undertakes every year. Overview of the CIP. It's a program that's a 5-year CIP. It also looks out beyond that 5-year time horizon. Looks out into the future and forecasts what our infrastructure needs are going to be, and tries to match up those infrastructure needs with revenue that might be available to the city from a variety of different sources. We always are looking for ways to fund projects using grants and the like, but a lot of our projects are funded using developer impact fees, which are starting to recover and come back now. There's a lot of federal and state transportation dollars that are in here as well, in addition to revenue we receive from our enterprise funds. So included in the CIP is detailed estimates and expenditures and revenues for all the projects. Every year we come back and we update those figures based on newest estimates and newest needs that we've anticipated for the coming years. So this current year has been an active year, as most years are for the city. We've completed a number of projects, or expect to complete a number of projects by the end of the fiscal year. You can see up here we have a total of about $43 million worth of capital projects that have been completed this year, starting at the top, which is the parking lot pavement rehabilitation project out of the Galt Market we did, about $130,000. Littleton Center renovation, new floor out there. Central Interchange is obviously the big one, nearly $40 million. And then we also had annual pavement rehabilitation projects totaling about $1.2 million. We did some slurry seals and overlay projects in different locations throughout the city. On the wastewater side, we are just finishing up the wastewater treatment plant facilities master plan design process. We'll be bringing that and having a workshop with the council coming up shortly to discuss the implications of that study. We also recently awarded the fiber optic line installation project. You'll see construction going on this month and next month. I think that project is supposed to be done into July, is what we're looking at right now. We also have been undertaking a number of annual lift station rehabilitation projects, and we're going to have more in the coming year that you'll see in the CIP project. Equipment for the streets division, we purchased a couple of new large pieces of equipment that I think are coming in great need and great handy. One is the skip loader. It's our most recent purchase, which is useful for a lot of the street maintenance repair work that we have to do. And the other one was purchased earlier in the fiscal year, which is the VACCON combo truck. I think we had a demonstration, not demonstration, but we did a little, we brought it by, Aiden and his crews brought it by one council meeting last year, and to kind of show that off. So I think they're getting great use out of those large pieces of equipment. In addition to the projects that are have been completed or will be completed this year, a number of projects that are in design or under construction currently that we wanted to highlight. You can see the list up on here, but one of the big ones that we have that's underway right now is the Live Oak Pump Station and Force Main. All the city's effluent goes through the Live Oak Pump Station, Force Main, vital infrastructure piece for the city. I know we were talking about that project when I first started here 7 years ago. So it's a long time coming, but we're nearing completion on that one. Twin Cities Roundabout, I already mentioned, that one is going to be awarded here shortly. The 4th Street parking lot open space and the C Street Complete Streets project are the two pictures that I showed at the beginning of the slide, and those are in progress. Unfortunately, with the lots of redevelopment funding, we've had to scale back the Complete Streets project and get some modifications through SACOG. And the railroad property is on hold right now pending litigation between the city and the state to try to spend our bond proceeds. And so we're hopeful that we'll be able to move forward with the whole thing, but right now we're really moving forward and concentrating on the C Street, 4th Street portion, which is mainly funded using some transportation dollars, but also a $2 million grant from SACOG that we got a couple years ago.
Yes. I have a question with that.
Yes.
The grant, does that affect the grant because we have to keep postponing that?
We actually got approval from the SACOG board about a month ago to modify that grant and the time frame and everything. So I think we're good right now with SACOG. Next one, two big projects after that related to water and wastewater. One is the wastewater treatment plant arsenic and nitrogen treatment project, and that's related to the master plan that I talked about just a minute ago. Another major upgrade necessary because of permit requirements by the state. The Regional Water Quality Control Board, we have to undertake significant improvements out at the wastewater treatment plant again, so we're in design phase of that right now. We'll be bringing back some financing options and how we're going to move forward with that project in the coming year. Next one is Coftwell, water treatment plant necessary for future water supply production in the city, both the well and the treatment facility off of Coffs Road near an existing reservoir that we have just south of Coffs. You notice the reservoir, that's the only thing that's there right now. The project is to add a well and add a treatment facility and allow us to take some of our older problematic wells offline once we get that online. And then the final one that we hope to have completed by the end of the current calendar year is the railroad quiet zone study. That project is moving along quite nicely. So those are just the highlight of some of the projects that we have that are underway right now, either in construction or in design.
Excuse me,
Yes.
Mr. Behrman, where are we at with the quiet zone?
We're going through the regulatory hurdles right now,
Right, okay.
and the actual construction is not going to take very long. The timeline, the last that I've been told, is for completion by the end of the current calendar year, so December of 2013. I don't know if Public Works has any more recent information than that. Is that still pretty good? All right.
Yeah, one of the hoops we're jumping through is getting the environmental clearances and a historical review and some of those things done.
Okay. So, again, this is a midterm update. So it's every 2 years we do kind of a big update. This isn't that. This is the one we do in between. So we really focus on just the changes from the one that we adopted last year to what's in front of you today, are the changes that we think are necessary in order to keep up with the changes, either funding sources or the scope and project expenditures have changed. And so we're making a number of recommendations, and sometimes there are some needs that come up during the year that we anticipate. One of the things that the council has requested that we do is really take a look at some of our deferred maintenance projects, and so some of the new projects in here refer or related to that effort to go out and really take a look at our infrastructure, specifically with our buildings, and see where we need to put some more money. And so there's some projects in here that I'll touch on that are related to that effort to do a better job of keeping up with the maintenance effort. So I'll just go by category. There are different categories that I'll touch on as we go through. The first one is general improvements. The first project with significant change is the City Hall renovation project. Originally this was put in the budget as a large project, multi-million-dollar project that would renovate the entire City Hall as well as expand City Hall with the addition of a separate wing to the north that would allow the city to bring engineering, planning services all under one roof, which would be nice. We don't have the funds right now to be able to do that project, but there are a number of things that we've identified as far as short-term improvements that we need to do, some of which are making the building more secure for employees as well as the public. Other improvements are related to IT. As our infrastructure needs expand in IT, we have more of a need for centralized infrastructure, server areas and whatnot that are climate controlled and things of that sort. So you can see up here there's a number of different projects that we've added. There's no money this year or next year, so these are projects that we put off into the following year, but things such as like a keyless access system, similar they have over at the police department, improvements in the lobby and the finance area to, again, kind of improve the security, and I already talked about some of the server room areas and so forth. So those are, hopefully, as the economy continues to improve, we'll have some money in the coming years to be able to do some of that effort. Next one is MSC building maintenance improvements. We've identified a significant maintenance issue out at MSC on the roof, and so we're in the process of continuing to evaluate that right now. The estimate we have is about $60,000 to do a significant repair project out on the roof. It may be possible to lower that cost once we get in there and figure out exactly what's happening, but that's the estimate that we put in there right now.
Is that on the main building?
It's on the main building. It's not just the front part, it's actually, yeah, behind that. Yeah, I don't know if it includes, you're talking about the little sunroom off to the front. I don't know if that $60,000 is meant to deal with that sunroom problem or if it's just the main part of the building.
We are looking into a couple of additional things that haven't been tried yet on this little sort of the aviary front window area. This would be just primarily looking at prior work that was done that has some deficiencies.
So that's the $60,000 we're recommending to add to next year to get that done, and it's funded using a variety of funding sources. The different operations that are housed in that building would all share in the cost of that project. Next one is railroad quiet zone. This is just moving some of the money around in order to accommodate construction. Corporate annex site improvements. This is, again, just kind of moving some of the costs around based on when we originally funded this, it was going to be funded using all Fund 9 money, which is transit money. Because transit isn't the only group that uses that fueling facility, the transit people have told us that we can't fund that project 100% using transit dollars. And so we've proportioned it out based on the weight of the vehicles and other things to give a proportionate share of the cost based on the vehicles that use that fueling facility. So it involves our street sweepers from Fund 3, Fund 2, which is our street, some of our heavy-duty trucks. Typically in those kind of situations, the heavier the vehicle, you have significantly more impact on the roadway. So this would repave and redo that corporate annex where our fueling facility is. A police cruiser, for example, has almost no impact on roads. It's the heavy trucks. It's the same thing in your residential neighborhood. Your typical residential car, truck has almost no impact on the paving. It's the garbage trucks, the delivery trucks, the big trucks that really impact that. And so we've tried to prorate that out to get the true cost of what that is. So that's what we've tried to do in that project.
And that's partially what their fuel permit tax money is for. When
Exactly.
they have on their trucks when they get those permits.
Yep, exactly. Next one is 4th Street parking lot and open space improvements. Again, we want to move forward with the environmental associated with that project, and so we've appropriated $45,000 in CDBG to continue that project moving. That way, when and if we get our redevelopment money freed up, then we don't have to go back and start the environmental all over again. So we're doing the environmental on the 6th Street and 4th Street at the same time we're doing the railroad property. And so it requires an additional appropriation, but there is money available in the CDBG project to do that.
Jason?
Yeah.
How much do we get a year in CDBG money?
It's about $150,000 right now. It used to be $200,000, and then they cut us back a year ago, I think, to $150,000, and I believe that's the projection going forward.
What we were carrying about 300, almost 400,000 this year's budget, is that correct?
Yeah. We had some built up from some prior years that we're trying to spend down now. And so the quiet zone is a big one, and then we've also put some money in this railroad property. So kind of all of our money down there in the Old Town area right now. And then the final one under general improvements is another one of these renovation or maintenance projects, the police department building renovation. Again, we don't have the revenue right now to support doing all the work, and so we've been kind of patching the HVAC units over there and making some improvements, but we've added significant amount of dollars, almost $240,000 for a new roof and replacement of carpet in various areas the following year. We did include some money next year for more of a significant HVAC replacement of about $30,000 to put in a large filter. That's one of the problems is when it was originally installed, they didn't do the filtration system in the right way, and so there's all kinds of sediment that's gotten in there and done damage to some of the air handlers and so forth. So we're going to put a large filtration system at the front end to hopefully prevent that from happening in the future.
Now, will that also cover repairs for the existing equipment up that's been damaged?
Yeah, that's kind of an ongoing, I think, challenge. You know, we do have money in the building repair maintenance fund that we have that's just kind of been drawing on an annual basis. We don't have any additional, well, I shouldn't say that. We did add, I think, another $15,000 next year in that account from what we have in the current year because we anticipated some of those AC units going out. So it's not in this CIP, but it's in the operating budget that you'll see.
How old is that building?
Building was built in 2004, 3? Is that right? I think so. So about 10 years.
So in 10 years, we've had that much problems with the HVAC system and,
Yeah,
and the roof?
you wouldn't think we would.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating, I think, for staff. And it's not just started this year either. I mean, we've been having problems for years out there with the HVAC system, and I know there were some challenges when they first built it. I think the initial builder went bankrupt, and they had to bring in another builder, and so I don't know if there were problems when that all happened, but it has given us more problems than you would anticipate for the age of that building.
So are the roof issues due to the, partly because of the HVAC issues on top of that roof? Do you know?
I'm not aware of that. I think they're independent, but I don't know if Aiden
Anybody?
or Steve, I don't know if they're related. I think they're separate, but they could be related. The question was on the police building. We have problems with the HVAC system, and then we have problems with the roof. Are they related? Is this okay?
They are not related. So the roof is failing because of
Age.
because it's 10 years old. What overheated?
So they put the tar down, and
Oh.
the heating, the heat back up,
Uh-huh.
and it latches the things together. We've been doing some spot repairs last couple of years.
Okay, so it's not because of the HVAC system, it's a separate issue like Mr. Chairman said. Okay.
We did bring in an independent firm that specializes in roofing assessments to look at a number of our city buildings, and we knew PD had concerns, we knew MSC had concerns. Utilities has also had a look at some of their, now going on 20-year-old roofs out at the treatment plant, and come back with a binder of recommendations, and so we're kind of prioritizing what we need to do in the short term versus what we can address in the long term.
Okay, thank you.
The next area is Parks and Recreation. A couple projects here. One of them is a new one, the Aquatic Center renovation. Again, kind of an aging facility. Recommendation is that we put in $42,000 next year for a retiling effort at the competition pool that we have out there. Staff did some retiling last year, or I think this year, at the kiddie pool area, and it seems to be holding, so we think we can get by there, but the competition pool does need to get redone. Some of the tiles are starting to come up and presenting hazards, so we're putting some money in there to do that. The plaster is starting to come off as well. It's chunking in certain areas, so we didn't put money in next year, but we have it in the following year, and so that's, you know, it's unfortunate. We've plastered the pool once since it was built, and that was about 5 or 6 years ago. We're a little bit surprised that it's starting to chunk off already, because you would expect you'd get maybe 8 to 10 years out of a plaster job. So so some of these areas where we have some potential for improper installations or other things on roofs and HVACs, to the extent that we can, we are going back. Typically, you have about a 10-year window where you can go back if there's some kind of defects or workmanship issues. And so for some HVAC issues and some roofing issues where we can, we're trying to go back and contact the original contractor and see if they'll help us facilitate repairs at no cost or reduce costs. So we're trying to do that where possible. The second project on here is Cibola Center renovation. Again, an aging building that just needs to be renovated. We've got money in here in 14-15 for floor and HVAC replacement. There's some money that we put in next year to do some, and as well at City Hall, to change out some of the partitions in the bathrooms that aren't ADA accessible. So that'll be an ADA project that you'll see on the operating budget side. So we're going to upgrade those, but the other things are going to have to wait a little bit longer. They're not critical right now. It's critical some of the other ones, so we've kind of pushed them off a little bit. Anybody have any questions on Parks and Rec? Go ahead and move on. Next one is transportation. First one is the C Street Central Galt Complete Streets project, which we've already touched on. A lot of kind of moving money around from CDBG, and we had to move in some Fund 29 money, which is Measure A, STA money, to compensate for the loss of the redevelopment money that we had. So again, we've reduced the scope and moved some money around in order to fund that project. Central Galt interchange improvements. We reduced the budget in Fund 29, which is Measure A, by $500,000, and we moved it to Twin Cities Roundabouts because that was a project that we knew we needed some additional funding, and the Twin Cities, the Central Interchange project now is finishing up, so we have a better idea of how much money is available, and that was money that came in, the project that came in under budget. We were able to free that money up and move it over to the other project. Annual pavement rehabilitation program. Again, this is one where we took some money out of that project and moved it over to the Twin Cities project. It still does result in a significant annual rehabilitation project in next year of $600,000. I also believe there's $600,000 in there for the current year. So we're still able to do kind of a decent sized project. We'd love to be able to do more. There's never enough money for street maintenance repairs, but right now our concentration is to get that Twin Cities project built for a variety of different reasons, but hopefully not take it all out of this. So we'll be coming back to the council shortly when we award that Twin Cities project and talking about whether we need to take any more money out of this annual rehab project in order to award the contract for the Twin Cities. But right now this is what's recommended. TCIP update, one of the recommendations is we added $40,000 to do an update to our TCIP program. One of the council's goals was to take a look at our fees, make sure we're competitive to see if we could possibly reduce our fees, particularly on the traffic or on the commercial side. And so this is some money that was in there that will allow us to hire a consultant to come in and evaluate, take a look whether we can reduce some of those fees. Next one is Twin Cities widening. Again, we shifted money from a couple different projects, $500,000 from Central Interchange and $1 million from our road rehab project in order to put $1.5 million more on this project to allow us to move forward with that.
Does that meet the funding requirement based on the bid opening recently, or
No,
we're still looking for additional
we're still looking for additional pots.
Okay.
Okay. Next one is transit fleet acquisition. This one's just been revised to reflect the true accurate cost of bus replacements that we need to do next year. So that amount has actually been reduced. Next area is water. We have 3 projects here. We've already talked about the water treatment plant and the well out at cost. Again, we've kind of moved some money around. We've applied for a low interest loan from the state through the state revolving fund loan, similar to what we did with the wastewater treatment plant project a couple of years ago. It offers excellent interest rates, and we have not heard back yet whether we're successful in getting that, but we've shifted some of the costs out a year for both design and construction just based on where we are now with the project and what we think the funding requirements are going to be. We've shifted some of that money out a year for both those projects. You can see that we've done that based on the state revolving fund loan projects. The next big one here is the water meter retrofit project. We're going to be actually coming back to the council shortly in maybe June or July to bring you up to speed on where we are with our negotiations for the selected for the contract, and allow the council to make some strategic decisions on where we are going to be moving forward with that project here in the near future. All we've done here with this project right now is took all of the remaining fund balance set aside for the water meter project and put it in there in this project right now. Before we didn't appropriate the full amount, so this takes a look at all of the amount we have set aside for water meters and appropriates the entire amount. So that's all we've done with that one.
Can you explain a little bit why was it increased 421,000?
So, well, we're going to need, in order to do the water meter project, we're going to need a lot more than that, and there is going to be a financing component associated with, when we went out to bid, we asked the companies to provide a financing option, 10 or 15 years. And so what we've done is, so we have a certain amount of money that's already been collected over the years, is about $1.7 million. And in the past, we hadn't appropriated the full amount. And so all we're doing now is we're saying, okay, we know we're going to need all that $1.7 million plus some. Right. And so let's appropriate what we know we have in the bank. And then when we come back to talk to the council about different financing options and what we want to do, then there will likely be a need for an additional appropriation at that time. But this at least takes all the money we have in the bank and appropriates it, allows us to kind of at least set that money aside.
Thank you.
Sure. Next one is wastewater, only one project here. This is, again, the large project that I told you we had coming up as far as upgrade. This is the wastewater treatment plant arsenic and nitrogen treatment project. We increased the budget by $963,000 in the current fiscal year from a 1990 wastewater treatment plant bond. So this one might be a little bit confusing. When we issued bonds for the last expansion of the plant, we had monies that were left over, that weren't spent on the project. And I don't know what the total dollar amount was back then, but it's accrued interest and everything else. And so now there's $963,000 in there, which we can use for wastewater treatment plant projects, including expansion and capacity and other things. And there are going to be components of this project related to expansion that will get us more capacity. And so our recommendation is we take that $963,000 and put it on that project because we know we're going to need that money. And then anything we don't have, we'll get a state revolving fund loan to do that. So basically all this does is take money that's has been sitting in the city's accounts since 1990 and appropriates that money for this specific project. I believe it's been in Fund 30. Is that right?
Yes.
Did you have something you were going to add to that?
Well, I was just going to wait till you got to the next part where you're talking about the amount should be reversed until project funding, because we're looking at use of the $963,000 on the repayment of the outstanding debt right now. So I was just waiting for you to get to that one section.
Gotcha.
But I can comment now if you'd like me to.
That's right. So we actually had budgeted, I think it's at the end of my slide, we had budgeted this extra $963,000 in Fund 7, which doesn't exist in Fund 7. So we're asking you to reverse that amount. And then there's going to be a project that we're bringing forward at the next council meeting that's going to refinance the existing bonds that we have. And it's a little bit complicated, but it'll allow us to reduce our debt service on the existing bonds, and then use that 963 to pay off a portion of the existing debt that we have. Did you want to highlight that?
Sure,
accurate?
that's exactly what it was. That was accurate. So what we were looking at, based on, instead of funding this, because there is another option for funding this project, is we thought that we would reduce the amount of interest that's being paid on our wastewater treatment plant bond issue, which was the capital impact fee sewer fund, and use the monies that are in Fund 30, which were residual amounts, and pay off that debt so we're no longer paying interest. It basically will mean that we'll have about 1 year left of debt service. So we are working on that staff report that will be on the June 4th agenda. So we were working on other financing sources for this project, but and that's why I think that reversal was important to bring to council this evening.
What is the interest rate that we're paying on that?
I believe it was 5 to 5.9, and that was through. It actually matures in 2016, so we're looking at that. We can actually shorten the term by using these funds, and a lower interest rate is what we're recommending, about 2%. So we have a full package for presentation, but I believe it was from 5.0 to 5.9 was what I seem to remember on that one through the term of 2016.
So is the 963 being used for debt service, or is it being used for actual projects like the arsenic?
No, we will well, our recommendation to council on June 4th will be that we use it to just retire that debt,
Okay.
to defease the bonds on that one, so we're not paying the interest rate.
So
and
it won't go to the project.
Correct.
I get
And that's why I was just kind of waiting for that second section where it said amount should be reversed.
And that is actually showing up here on the third one, but I'll start at the top, where these are some things that have come to light since we printed the package for the City Council, some additional changes that we're recommending you make to the CIP. So when we come back at the June 4th meeting, we will make these changes, and then you'll adopt the CIP with these changes and any other changes that you want to make. But let me go over these 3 changes. I think we left copies for you as well on your desk there, but just 3 of them. The first one is Fund 29, the annual pavement rehab project, is to reduce the expenditure by $492,000. The money's transferred to another project, but not reduced here as a result of an increase in fund balance. So we took money and moved over to the Twin Cities project, and it wasn't reduced in this project. Is that accurate, Public Works? Yeah, so we need to make that adjustment because we don't have enough money to do them both to that level. The next one is relating to the Aquatic Center rehab project. When we were kind of moving money around trying to figure out what we could afford, we took money, $30,000 out of next year's tile project, and the intent was to just move it into the fiscal year 14-15 year, but instead it was just eliminated entirely. So all we want to do is keep that money and just move it into the next fiscal year. Actually, so right now in your CIP it doesn't show up at all. So we were requesting that you add $30,000 back in fiscal year 14-15 to fund the work necessary for the Aquatic Center rehab. And then the third one is what Inez and I were just talking about, which is the $963,000. We need to reduce that amount in Fund 7 for that project. And I think those are the only adjustments, unless staff has any additional
Actually, we
adjustments. We have another one.
We actually added 2 more. These are items subsequent to, I think, noontime this afternoon. So if I can go over those with you.
Well, there's 2 more that are under the operating budget.
Oh, excuse me then. Okay.
Are there more on the CIP?
No, they were on the operating budget.
Okay.
I'm corrected. Thank you.
Okay. So the recommendation is that the council receive the report on the recommended adjustments to the 5-year CIP, solicit public input, ask any questions, and then provide direction to staff on any proposed changes or modifications to the recommended CIP adjustments, including the sheet that we handed out to you today. I also wanted to recognize and thank the staff that is here in attendance. A lot of hard work, a lot of late nights, a lot of number crunching, and it's a big effort. There's not only in putting the document together, but in actually building these projects. A lot of significant work, obviously, and so Public Works Department, Finance, but everybody involved. And I'll get to the operating side is everybody's involved. CIP is largely our Public Works Department that goes out and bids these things and gets them built, and a lot of effort that goes into that. And then Finance helps to keep all the money flowing and keep everything on track. So just wanted to recognize them and all the hard work they put into this document. It really is, it's a great planning tool for us. I know when we first instituted this 5-year CIP, it gave people a lot of headaches because it was a lot of work, and still gives people a lot of headaches because it's a lot of work. But it helps us looking forward into the future so we can plan where we're going, the resources we need to get there, instead of just things happening upon us that, okay, now we need to do this, oh, now we have to start saving for this. We can look out into the future 5, 10, 15 years and say, here's what we need, here's the improvements we need to make, and here's how we're going to get there. And we start putting financing plans in place so we're not caught off guard. And so it's a really useful tool for the city and for the community. So that's my presentation on the CIP, and I'm happy to answer any questions, as I know staff is as well.
Council, questions? Well, I think that probably says it all, and job well done.
Move staff's recommendation.
Second.
Call for the vote, please. Liz.
Vice Mayor Singleton?
Aye.
Councilmember Payne?
Aye.
Councilmember Campion?
Aye.
Councilmember Cruz?
Aye.
Mayor Powers?
Aye. Okay.
That includes.
So that include the additional one?
That
Okay.
included the additional.
That's what I assumed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Got it.
So now we're on to the recommended 2012-13 and 2013-14 budget adjustments. And that's you again, Mr.
Very good. Part 2 of my presentation. And again, this is the document that involves everybody, particularly the people here in this room. I think they brought a lot of their support staff, and they see these big binders on the table. What we give you is a lot of the summaries. We give you as much detail as you need. There's all kinds of backup that goes into that, and they've got a city manager that requires a lot of detail. So
Yeah. I thought they were just trying to scare us.
So again, I wanted to kind of recognize and thank staff for all their hard work on these documents. It's tough, especially with the economy the way it is, and ups and downs, and trying to estimate. I think community development always tries to predict how many building permits we're going to issue, how many new homes, what commercial projects are coming in, and that's hard. It's difficult to kind of get your crystal ball out and figure out where we're going, and all the other departments trying to guess gas prices, everything. You try to get as good as you can. The one thing you can know in budgeting for sure is that you're going to be wrong. What you don't know is how far off you're going to be, because you can't get it right. It's impossible. You can't predict where you're going to be, and so we try to be conservative. We try to estimate expenditures high. We try to estimate revenues low. That way when we come in, we have revenues that come in and exceed that. It's good news. Expenditures, when we come in under our expenditure, that's good news. We don't like to be the other way, but sometimes we are, and sometimes we're off on our projections, and we try to keep the council informed during the year through our financial updates that we bring back to you. Sometimes it requires supplemental appropriations during the year. We come back and say, okay, we didn't put this in the budget, and we'll ask you for a mid-year or adjustments throughout the year. We do that, and then do the big cleanup items at the end of the year when we do our midterm right here, and then we'll do the other big one again next year. So that's kind of my prelude to getting into the details. So
I would just want to add that this involves a lot of trust among all of us, the council and the staff, because if you overestimate your budget and you come in under, you're saying, oh, did you guys pad your budget? So, and then of course if they come in over budget, that's not a good thing either.
Yeah.
So I think there has to be a lot of trust between the council and the staff, and I believe that we did have that so far.
Good. Well, I think what we've done over the years with the economy the way it's been is we've had to be more tight with our estimates. There's no fluff left. And so before you could estimate a little bit extra because you didn't need to be that tight, but we don't have any extra dollars in the budget. We still have a deficit, and so you have to justify for every additional item. And so over the years we've really got it down. So we used to, every year when we finished the year, we'd have $500,000-$600,000 left in the budget. We don't have that anymore. Last year, I think we ended with $130,000 maybe, 160, and like I said, in prior years we were $600,000-$700,000 every year, or we just had extra money. We don't have that anymore, so we try to estimate as close as we can without going over. So let's get into some of the details here. I just put up some numbers to give you a sense of. These are from the Schedule 4, and again, this is just like the CIP. This is going to be an update of what we did last year. So it's not a complete new budget. It's just taking the numbers because the council already adopted the current year and next year. All this is doing is taking it and updating the information and the numbers that we have there. So when we did the budget last year, we projected our fund balance was going to be about $7.5 million at the end of fiscal year 12-13. Based on the revised budget that we're presenting to you this evening, the general fund balance is projected to be about a little over $7.1 million. That's a reduction of $337,000 for a variety of different reasons, which I'll go into, everything from revenues, expenditures, and transfers that make up that difference. Next year, when we did the budget last year, we projected that the general fund balance was going to be at about $7.3 million at the end of next year. Based on the numbers that we're presenting for you tonight, the revised budget, we're a little less than $6.5 million, which is a reduction of $887,000, which leaves us with an operating deficit of $671,000 next year, which is more than what we originally projected. We were projecting a deficit of less than $200,000, and so again, for a variety of reasons, which I'll go into, reduced revenues, some additional expenses, and some transfers that are hitting us that are making that deficit grow a little bit. But I guess the good news is that despite the current year being kind of worse than we anticipated, and next year we again project it to be worse than originally projected, the signs of an improving economy are certainly there. We're getting a lot of calls, a lot of developers starting to pull permits again. With Walmart coming in this next year, we think the key pieces are in place to allow us to be successful in the coming years. We are going to continue to have struggles. There's still rising FERS costs, which has every city in California scared with the way they've changed their actuarial numbers and their estimates and assumptions. Healthcare costs continue to rise, other things out of our control that will continue to demand that we take a look at our budgets very closely, and we very prudently watch that reserve number. We want to make sure that we maintain that number as healthy as we can. The one thing that I think that saved the city, allowed us to persevere during the hard economic times when other cities have declared bankruptcy, is we had a healthy reserve. We were able to rely on that reserve during the down years to get us through that, and we have relied on it. We've used it over the last several years. Without that, you don't have many options. And so the higher you get that reserve, the more options you have, the more time you have to adjust. And so that's what we have here. And at the numbers that we have showing here at $6.5 million at the end of next year, it's still a healthy reserve, albeit down from where it was at its peak. It's still fully funding the city's reserve policy, according to that policy. And so it is something that I'm recommending this budget to you this evening. I'll go ahead and get on to some of the details about this budget. We're going to start, obviously the star of the show is always the general fund. That's the thing that funds most of our day-to-day operations, most of our staff, our police department, a lot of our operating departments. So that's where we always focus. We'll take a look at our general fund revenues first. Overall, in the current fiscal year, revenues are actually expected to increase slightly, $76,000. But next year, they're expected to decrease by a little less than $300,000 from the revised budget we put together last year. I'll just highlight some of the major fluctuations that you'll see in there. Reduction in property tax from where we originally estimated is probably one of the biggest hits in amount of $329,000 this year and $172,000 next year. Part of that next year is Walmart. We projected Walmart coming in. In the current year, we just got hit again by reductions, Prop 8 reductions relating to property tax values, home values continuing to go down, a lot of appeals that were processed in the current year. And Finance Department had a meeting a month or so ago, and the assessor's office is expecting more of an increase next year. And so, you know, we're cautiously optimistic that those home values you see around you, if you follow Zillow and Realtor.com and things, you can see the home values starting to creep up. And so all those that had been reduced and people saw their property taxes go down over the last 5 years, those are not under the same Prop 13 restrictions, and so they're able to go up more rapidly. Under Prop 13, you're capped at 2% a year, but if yours went down under a Prop 8 reduction, they can go back up just as fast as they went down, and so some of those homes will start to creep back up in the coming year, so hopefully we'll see some relief there. Sales tax is another one that we're continuing to see kind of sluggish information in the current year. There's a decrease in the current year of $41,000 and a big hit next year of almost $400,000. So, you know, of that amount that I told you at the beginning, we've got a deficit of, you know, $671,000. Walmart's almost $400,000 of that. So hopefully when Walmart comes in the following year, then we'll really see a dramatic increase. But they're certainly, we had originally projected based on their estimates that that store would be open this summer, and instead it looks like it won't be open until next year sometime. So we're pushing. Looks like we're getting close. Estimated time frame for breaking ground is September right now, later this summer or early fall.
How close are they to getting their permit?
Sandy, you want to give a brief update?
She's laughing already.
We're doing everything in our power. We have summarized all the comments from the various agencies, and almost everybody tells us they're this close. They just have some minor little things, and when they submit, they're failing to sort of address some of those. Right now, we've compiled everybody's comments, and we're trying to set up a go-to meeting, a web meeting with their architect, our plan checker, and staff, and just go over each one. And we have the capability now of doing some electronic plan checking, so we're hoping we can actually make the revisions on the plans at that meeting so that we can force the permit a little sooner than they're looking at. They want to go ahead and bid the project so that they can get a contractor and have the contractor pull the permit. So that's kind of why they're looking at September. But we want to have that permit ready to issue and encourage them to pull that permit as soon as possible.
What are some of the comments that they have to deal with? They're coming back to Walmart before they can get their permit.
A lot of it is some of the life safety stuff, some of the Cal Green things that just need to be noted on the plans by law, and they just haven't addressed them adequately and shown them. So we've kind of said just on page 7, we'll add the note and cited the section. And
is that coming from us or somebody else?
Coming from our plan checkers, and we've looked them over, and they are code requirements. They need to be on the plans.
When did they first submit these plans?
In December of 2012 was they're doing multiple submittals. They've got their racking set, they've got their fire set, their civils, their architectural, their landscaping. Landscaping and health are finished, so those are all ready to go. It's mainly the architectural that's got the most comments left, but they're relatively minor comments. And fire also has a few comments left.
Did we have any kind of a meeting with them before this where we wouldn't be waiting on this to get on their plans?
Well, their architect is very familiar. I mean, they've done numerous Walmarts throughout California, so they're pretty familiar with the information. That's why we're doing the go-to web meeting now, is just to wrap up these final little issues. And they apologize every time that, oh, we missed that comment or whatever. So they recognize that it's on their end that they need to get those comments
I
done.
guess I'm surprised because they have done so many that they would leave things off that they should know are required.
That's what I was gonna say.
Well, it doesn't sound like there's significant issues, but they're issues that have to be addressed.
They're really not, yeah. And so we're confident we can move this forward. We're just trying to get some dates from them that will work for a joint meeting on the webinar so we can get that.
But even though they're not significant, they're
You still hold it up.
They're holding it up. Exactly.
Yeah, they have to be on there. They have to be wet stamped by the architect, and
So what
so we're getting close.
Sandy's suggestion was, instead of sending back more comments, is that we actually get everybody on this meeting and say, okay, let's just make the comments and we'll change it for you.
Yep.
And we'll get it all done. That way, it's not another round of back and forth. We're actually just going to get it all done working together. We'll sit in a room or, online and just hammer through each of the different comments. And at the end of the meeting, it's done and it's ready to, get your permit. So I think that's a good approach.
good plan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks, Sandy.
I think, like the rest of us, or at least most of us, are worried that they're gonna delay it again, and we just wanna get that shovel on the ground, I think.
Absolutely.
At least get that permit pulled, yeah.
Well, even if they get the plants done, doesn't mean they're gonna pull the permit. So, I mean, it's just another step in the process, so it's still, they control the process and how fast they wanna move them.
No, I understand that,
And that's what worries me because
Right.
I'm thinking they should have known,
since they've done so many.
what should have been on the plans.
Right.
I just wonder if they are purposely, because we keep saying when Walmart opens, we'll have more sales tax or whatever.
Right.
So,
Well, Walmart, they figure that from the time they decide to go in a community, it is at least 7 years before they open. I mean, that's their plan, only because they know of all the delays they have. So I mean,
Sorry.
it's unfortunate. I certainly wish that they would move quicker, but I think they just kind of do what they want.
Well, did it take them that long for the second one in Elk Grove?
That was an existing building, I think, wasn't
Oh.
no, it wasn't.
it? It wasn't on the second one?
I didn't think so. Uh-uh.
I don't know how long. I don't know how long it took. I know that they were going through a retrofit in another portion of somewhere in Sacramento County.
No, that was, where the
Those are the
existing.
groceries that they took over for the Gottschalks, I think, building.
Oh, yes, that's what it was. Yeah. Anyway,
So
kind of off.
I think we're moving as quickly as we can on the project, and like Kurt said, ultimately it's going to be up to them. But we have not heard any indication that they're not moving forward, and maybe that they're trying to fit it in with the timing of some other projects. They can only manage so many, and so they've got their projects lined up for the next 2 years, and so where Galt fits into that is they may be thinking, well, September is our date anyways, and so we're not in a hurry. We're just going to wait and do our thing, and who knows. We've had a hard time, getting anything definitive out of them, and they have multiple people that represent them. So you've got an architect, an engineer, Walmart headquarters, and sometimes they're each saying different things. We even had one of their public relations person say something totally different than the rest of the people. So it's, anytime you get a company like that, you don't really know who you're dealing with, unfortunately.
I just think given that we have to be really careful about counting on any kind of revenue from them until,
Yeah.
like Councilman Singleton said, till they start shoveling the dirt.
Yeah.
Do we have revenue estimates in the budget outside of these modifications?
We've taken out all of the property tax, sales tax out of the
Okay.
budget.
Okay.
The only thing that's remaining in here is impact fee revenue.
Fees, yeah.
Fees. So we anticipated they would pull permits this next year, so that would be some building permit fees, some traffic impact fees, and all the
Right.
fees that go along with that.
Right.
So that's the only thing I think that's left in the budget relating to Walmart. Is that accurate, finance, in development?
I believe that there was a small amount in property taxes because if they're actually pulling the permits to construction in year 2, but I think it was a minor amount. But we just wanted to at least recognize it because we were being hopeful.
So the next couple items are positive things that we got this year. The first one is some pass-through payments, residual payments. These are, they look good because we got additional money, $183,000, but it was our money. We had to make payments to the state, and so we get our share back. Thank you, state. We get a percentage of our own money back. So it does help the general fund a little bit, but we lose out in other areas. The next one was a victory for cities across the state where counties had been over-collecting property tax administration fees based on the triple flip. That's been reversed now, and so we got a nice check from the county in the amount of $138,000, and then going forward, we won't have to pay that administrative fee. So you'll see that as we go through here, there's a reduction in our non-departmental as well. And then we also increased building permit fee estimates for next year in the amount of $73,000 based on our recent permit activity that we're receiving. So,
Do you know off the top of your head how many residential permits that's based on, or what the composition is between residential and commercial?
Yeah, for fiscal year 12-13, we assumed 16 single family. We are actually at 14 now, and Mr. Guthridge brought in 2 more, so by the end of the week we should hit our projection.
Very good.
Next year we assumed 24, and we have had a lot of development interest, and they are moving forward rapidly, so I don't think we're going to have any trouble hitting that. For commercial, this year we did not project any development revenues. For 13-14 we have Walmart, McDonald's, Family Dollar, the movie theater project, and one of the Galt Village Center pads projected.
Good. Thank you.
okay. Let's see. So it's continuing with general fund revenue. We have, again, a few more fees related to building permit activity, plan check fees, planning recovery fees, in the amount of, for next year, $23,000 and $67,000 respectively. A hit that we have in the current year as well as next year that Sean has talked to you about, I think, in the past, is interest income continues to go down. So when we did the budget last year, we thought we were being really conservative by putting 0.74% interest, and now we're looking at, in the current year, 0.46%, and next year 0.4%. So almost better to keep the money under the mattress, but it is what it is, and that's pathetic, but that's what we've got. And I don't know if we're going to be able to do anything better than that, and just maybe hopefully that interest rates will come back up, but I wouldn't hold my breath. So we've reduced that. It affects us to the tune of $47,000 in the current year and $47,000 next year. Another positive one is we received $100,000 this year and expect to receive $100,000 next year for this Prop 30 Frontline Law Enforcement Intervention grant that we can use for overtime for our police department and so forth. It's meant to try to manage all those early releasees from the county jails and state prisons and whatnot back into our various communities. And so the governor gave a local jurisdiction some additional money, and it's being pooled and collected at the county level, but through some work by the chief and all the chiefs. Citrus Heights is in charge of kind of being the fiscal agent for that, and every city except for Sacramento in the county is getting the same amount of money. So Folsom, Rancho, Elk Grove, and Galt, I believe, all get $100,000, which is pretty good for our size city that we're getting the same amount as some of those larger cities. But it is based on the number of projected releasees into the community. So that tells you that we have a lot coming into our community, which is not good.
As a percentage, yeah.
So I can't, Chief, do you remember what the numbers were? Where's the chief? There he is. As far as how many people we expect to be released into our community next year or this year?
They're actually anticipating 9,200 of them to be released in the next couple of months, in addition to what we already have.
Is that just Sac County? This is statewide?
This is statewide. The figures as far as Sacramento County, I'm unaware. We have, depending on who you listen to, anywhere from 19 to 25 of them here in Galt currently. But they seem to be very transient, and they move around quite a bit, and that's what this money was for, was to do checks throughout the county to make sure that they're in compliance and that we're actually checking on them.
Good.
It's a 2-year program, you said?
Actually, it's an ongoing
For now.
For now. It's kind of like the COPS money where it's been going on for 30 years, although it's not guaranteed.
Right.
They're telling us right now there's no sunset on it, so the anticipation, unless it gets cut from the budget in the future, that it would continue from year to year. The good thing is there aren't a lot of restrictions on how you use the money either. It kind of leaves it to the local jurisdiction as how you're going to want to use it. Okay, so those are the summary of the revenues for general fund. Now move into the expenditure highlights, again for the general fund. Recommended operating budget in the current fiscal year is approximately $11.5 million and $11.5 million next year. Not much of an increase. The decrease in the current year compared to the current budget of $260,000 and an increase next year of $270,000. And I'll go through the major fluctuations so you can see what's driving those changes. The first one is the reduction of furlough hours citywide that was approved last July 1, when every city employee had their furlough hours reduced, and for unrepresented employees had the hours eliminated. That cost the city an additional $220,000 citywide. There's also a proposal to eliminate furloughs for every employee starting July 1 of 2013, which if the council, there's a separate staff report after this budget one that we're going to go into more details about what that proposal is. But if the council agrees with that, and we would then bring that forward at the next meeting on June 4th for implementation, but that would increase costs next year by an additional $126,000, which means the total cost of the city by eliminating the furloughs entirely is about $347,000. So that's what we've been saving over the last several years by furloughs. It's about $347,000 a year, which is significant.
If we do that, does that mean we'll be open on Fridays, the City Hall?
Well, we're on the 980 schedule
So we won't
right now, so we would continue to be closed on Fridays.
every Friday?
Well, right now it's kind of a mix of furlough days and 980 days. When we get off furloughs, that means we'll actually be working every other Friday. And so the recommendation is that we would continue to be closed on Fridays, every Friday, but if the council certainly wanted to give direction, we could be open on those days that staff was working here. I think the recommendation would be that we would leave the 980s in place and that we would be closed on Fridays for a couple different reasons. First is I think staff is more productive on those days. They can kind of get a lot of their work done free of phone calls and some of the interruptions that happen. They can kind of get some of that work done. The other thing I think is really from a, some people might say, well, let's open on the Fridays that we're here because it's a public service, but it actually becomes, I think, really confusing to the public not knowing what Friday you're going to be here. You imagine if you had your favorite restaurant that was closed every other Monday. Would you go down there trying to figure out which Monday they were going to be open or not? You probably just won't go there at all on Mondays because you would never know when it was going to be. It's the same kind of thing, I think, for City Hall. It's kind of hard to be open every other day because people aren't going to go to their computer and look at the calendar and say, oh, are they open today? And so I think from that standpoint, it makes sense to continue it. But some cities do that. Some cities have 980s. They're open every Friday. Certainly, if the council directs, we can do that. That's not really on the agenda for tonight for discussion, but if you wanted to discuss that item, we could bring it back at June 4th when the council considers elimination of the furloughs, and we can talk about that, the schedule at the same time.
What I would like to see is at least somewhere that somebody could call on these Fridays, because being closed all the time, I think there should be a main number that people can call in case they do need an emergency or something.
Well, police
That's just my
department is
thought.
open.
Yeah.
But
Police department's open.
If there's an emergency, they can
They'll
dispatch. They're going to respond and do that.
It's not like you have an emergency with finance, I wouldn't think.
So if there's a water leak or sewer leak or
Yeah,
something,
that's
it'll
what
be
I'm thinking.
That's
Yeah.
taken care of.
Okay.
that is taken care of. So if the council wants to re-examine that, then just let us know and we can do that. Otherwise, we'll just assume that if the council does go forward with eliminating furloughs, that we keep the current schedule that we have right now.
I'm assuming that the increased cost by eliminating the furloughs, $347,000 is due to having paid the health costs as one of those that we incur. What's causing that to go up? So
The 347, that's all from the furloughs.
just
So that's basically, when we initially implemented it was about a 5% pay reduction for all staff. PD was a little bit less.
Yeah.
But I think PD was about 3.5%, and the rest of the staff was 3.55%, and the rest of the staff was 5%. So that's where the savings comes from. The next one is the healthcare savings.
Okay.
When we switched to CalPERS Health last year, there was a savings to the city in the amount of about $260,000 in the first year, and then $208,000 for next year, based on that transition. The next item actually kind of eats into that savings a little bit, because there's again another staff report later on this evening that talks about this pre-funding for retiree health care obligations. There's money in the budget in the amount of $130,000 in the current year that will fund our employee health care retiree obligation, kind of pre-fund it so that we don't have a future liability.
Right.
And if you want to do that on an annual basis, it's about $70,000 a year that, it says 130, but there's actually some administration costs in there, so it rounds up to about $70,000 a year that we would need to put aside in order to entirely pre-fund that obligation and have no city future liability. And Paula is going to get into the details of that later in the staff report. But just so that you know, there is the $130,000 in the current year for this year and for next year's obligation, and that money is coming out of the savings we got from transitioning to CalPERS Health. The other big thing that I mentioned at the beginning is the PERS rate increase next year, which results in increased citywide costs of almost $200,000 from the original budget. So it went up a lot more than what, and we don't make those numbers up. PERS gives us every year, they give us an estimate of what our costs are going to be, and last year when they gave it to us, we put in the budget what it was going to be, and then this year they gave us the number and they said, oh, it's a couple percentage higher than what we told you it was going to be last year, and so we have to make those adjustments. So that results in increased costs of $193,000. So if you look at, if you just look at next year's budget, and we talked about the $600,000 or $700,000 gap, if you think about Walmart being $400 and PERS being $200, that explains a lot of the increase for next year. There's some other things in here, some up, some down, but you take a few of these items and they really kind of tell you the picture of what's driving our costs. So those are kind of the highlights of these are things that affect citywide budgets. I do want to go in and highlight each of the individual departments, kind of note for you significant modifications or changes to the budget, and this is, if there's any specific questions. We gave you copies of each of the departmental budgets, so if you have questions or concerns, each of the departments are here to answer those. We'll kind of go through it, and again, we're not going to go through each one line by line. We're going to kind of highlight the major changes from what was adopted last year, but feel free to stop us, interrupt as we go through. In the council, there's not a significant change except for the SAC Metro cable. When we originally put that budget together, we anticipated getting the whole grant money for the control room and for this council chambers. It turns out that SAC Metro cable ended up buying the equipment over here in this back room by themselves. So that means we didn't get the revenue, but it also means we didn't spend the money. So the net effect is zero on the city council. So we reduced revenues and we also reduced expenditures in that line. So you see the change, but they kind of net each other out. The next one is human resources. There's an increase in professional services and a couple different things. One is to issue an RFP, get some consulting services for 457 plan, which is a deferred retirement program that the city has. The other one is to have an evaluation done of city's current health care, salaries, other kinds of benefits, just to kind of gauge ourselves with our neighboring communities and kind of see where we are from a competitive standpoint. So there's some additional money that's been added to both of those line items for human resources.
You remember about how much the increase in dollars is on
for each one of those?
overall?
Paula, you remember? I believe it was about $15,000 for each one. And those likely they'll come in less than that, but those were numbers that we put in there.
Okay.
Next one is information technology. And a significant change in here was we are recommending taking our existing part-time IT technician position and transitioning that into a full-time IT technician position. I think if you talk to any of the departments, they will tell you that there is a significant need in the city for additional IT support. We have a number of systems that have been added and expanded over the years that, and as the city continues to grow, that need continues to increase. And I think the addition of a part-time staff person in the last year or two has really helped keep up with the workload, but it continues to, I think, increase, and so the recommendation is that we make that a full-time position. The budget increase for doing that change is about $27,000.
Are there any possible plans in the future to add a third or another half? Because I know that staff would love that idea as well.
Sure. We only budget for the next year, but there's a need for not only additional IT support. If you look at any of our departments, we are understaffed in almost every area that we have. If it comes to planning or building or parks and rec, or there is a need, and we have about, I think, 13 or 14 positions right now in the city that are frozen. So in the past, those positions were here. They're no longer here. Our workload has not gone down for the most part. The city continues to grow and move, and so there are needs throughout the organization to add more bodies. And there are some, I think, incremental steps, some small steps in this budget that are getting us back to where we need to be, but we're not in a position yet to add back everything we want to add back. So I would imagine if things continue to progress, revenues are stabilized, that in the coming years you will see more of that, more of these positions that are returned or added, but we will need to be very slow in doing that. One thing that you always need to be cautious about is adding a full-time or even a part-time position, because it's very hard to get rid of and painful to get rid of if you need to. It's always easy to do one-time things. It's easy to buy a new truck. It's easy to put something in. It's a one-time thing. It doesn't continue to live with you year after year. You have to be very careful with employees, and you want to be careful, not to do that until you're confident that you're on stable financial footing. And so we are very, very cognizant of that. Next department is finance. Some changes here. We are recommending filling a vacant senior accounting assistant position, an employee that just recently got or is in the process of moving over to our police department and our dispatch center. Just creating a vacancy gives us an opportunity. Anytime we have a vacancy, we have an opportunity to re-examine the department. Department director kind of take a look at what their needs are, and if there's an opportunity to maybe do some reorganization, that's what we're recommending, and this is what the finance director and I are recommending to you this evening, which is to take that vacant position and convert it into an analyst position, which will better meet the needs of the department. We currently have a part-time analyst position. We would change that to a part-time accounting assistant position, and we would also reduce the hours associated with that. Actually, it wouldn't even go from a part-time; it would go down to a temporary, which is fewer hours. So the net change in all of what I just described actually results in a budget reduction of $12,000. But we believe that it more accurately and beneficially impacts the department, and it gets, I think, the finance department what they're looking for. So it doesn't really add hours, but it puts the right bodies in the right place, and it actually results in a cost savings. So that's the recommendation for the finance department.
So does this involve an employee that's already there?
Well, we have
changing all this stuff around?
No, because we have a vacancy because that employee is moving over to the police department.
Okay, thank you.
Under non-departmental, we have a couple changes. The first is increase in liability insurance. Second is one that I referred to earlier, which is a reduction in our paying for the county administrative fees. So it's the property tax administration fees, where we got that $130,000 back. So we're also going to be reducing that on an ongoing basis. So if you net those two things out, as well as some other things, we're looking at an increase of about $10,000 under non-departmental. Under the police department, there we go. We have several different changes. Nothing really too significant here, but we have, in the current year, under field operations, we have a number of vacancies, as the council's aware of. that do result in some cost savings in the current year. A lot of the cost savings we have, however, are taken up by overtime, increased overtime for the department in order to cover some of those shifts. We've had more officers working overtime, so a lot of the cost savings, again, is taken up in overtime that you'll see in there. We also have some additional money in Fund 38, which is for Public Safety CFD, and Fund 70. The recommendation is that we fund a portion of an additional officer in Fund 38 to use up some of the available fund balance in Fund 38, thereby freeing up some of the general fund money. We're also recommending, instead of funding 2 new vehicles out of Fund 70, which is the COPS money, we're recommending transitioning one of our general fund officers, at least a portion of them, about 80% of that position, over to Fund 70. We used to always fund officers out of Fund 70. We transitioned away from that a couple of years ago and started putting equipment in there. With the challenges the city's having financially, we're recommending putting back a body into Fund 70, at least for the time being, and as things improve, we may be able to make that transition back out of there. But for the time being, that's the recommendation. Detectives, there's replacement detective vehicles in there in the current year from cost savings. We also have in dispatch, we have some vacancies. One vacancy from the general fund, I believe, that's just being filled with our employee that's moving over from finance, and then we have one vacancy from our Measure R as well, which you see down the next line, which is Measure R. We have one vacancy right now in Measure R for police officer, and we have one vacancy in dispatch for Measure R.
Did they already replace the detective car, or they're looking to replace it?
No, they have not done that yet. I think that they're in the process of evaluating that and make that purchase before the end of the fiscal year.
That's correct. We're looking at all the options regarding cost of the vehicle.
But PD has received another vehicle, is that correct?
That's correct. That's the supervisor's vehicle.
Well, I think we have one other patrol vehicle this year,
Correct.
and then another patrol vehicle next year. Is that
We-
right? Or 2 next year?
We have one next year, and we have the 2 this year.
Okay.
Do we know how long before that's on the road and road ready? After?
We're waiting for the supplier as far as the person who sets the car up. And in fact, I think Lieutenant Vasuzi talked to him today because we were supposed to get a call back at the end of last week, and we hadn't heard from him. Okay. So we're, as soon as they can get it on the road, we're hoping within about 2 weeks.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I already mentioned the COPS funding. Moving on to Community Development Department under Planning. There is an increase in the current year due to consulting services for the housing element update and the zoning matrix update. Actually, on your sheet there that was handed out, we're recommending moving that money into next fiscal year. We're just not able to get it all done this fiscal year, so there's about a $40,000 move from the current year into next year. That's recommended for those 2 services, housing element and the zoning matrix. And there's also a recommendation for a deletion for next year for the Buxton Scout software of about $15,000.
What is that?
Sandy, do you want to describe that?
Yes, when we hired the Buxton company to prepare the retail analysis that they did for us, part of that service was we got 2 years free of their, what they call their Scout software. It's a proprietary software where you can do some demographic searches. We can look at drive time radiuses and that sort of thing. After the 2-year contract runs out, which is July 1, it's $1,250 a month to continue that service. Unfortunately, we really have not had a lot of interest expressed from the community, from the business owners and things, that makes that software valued at $15,000 a year, in our opinion. So we're recommending that we remove Scout from the process.
I think that's a good idea.
Yes, I did too.
I did also want to clarify the housing element. We will be finishing this fiscal year. We have a consultant. We've gone through the RFP process. We'll be hiring a consultant this year. It's the zoning updates that we're just going to have to move it a little bit into next year.
Okay. Under Community Development Department, Building Safety Inspection Services, we're recommending adding some money, an amount of $33,000 next year for a temporary building inspector as those building inspections increase, new homes, businesses. It's getting to be a lot for John and Rusty to keep up with, so we're recommending putting some money in there. And that's offset by the revenue we receive from the issuing the building permit. So we're hopeful that we can find a qualified person that can fill in on a temporary basis, maybe a couple days a week, that can help supplement that. And as building permit activity continues to increase, we'll monitor it, and we may need to come back to you later if things really increase faster than what we're anticipating, and augment that and add some additional funds to that. But right now, this is based on what we know. This is what we're recommending.
How will you find that person? Will you contract it out or to an agency or something?
You know, we originally looked at going through a company that provides that, and it's really expensive. I think it was like $80 an hour or something to go through a company. We think we can find somebody that maybe somebody that's retired from another agency, the county, that wants to just work, 15, 20 hours a week to do some supplemental building inspection services, or somebody that, so we're going to look out. We're going to do our own recruitment and see what we can find. Hopefully we can find somebody that's qualified.
I hope that we will be careful, though, and not cut back on our code enforcement
Right.
to fill.
And that's why we're putting this, because one of the things we talked about, well, we can just have Rusty do more, and then, we don't want to do that because I know he's a valuable asset to this community, and so we don't want him doing, because he's certainly capable of doing inspections, and he does do inspections, but we don't want him to focus too much of his time in that area. So Community Development is recommending this money so that he can continue to spend his time on code enforcement, the majority of his time anyway.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
I do too.
Yeah. Let's see.
Because we do really need a full-time code enforcement person too.
Yes. A lot of work to be done.
There's a lot of work to be done out there.
The other thing we're recommending is the building permit specialist. If you recall, this used to be a full-time position. We actually used to have a couple of individuals in this position. We used to have 2 people, and then we froze that the second position, and then last year when we had our only full-time person that left, we backfilled it just with a part-time person that was working almost full-time, I don't think 36 hours a week or something. And now that the building activity has really increased, we're recommending bringing that back to a full-time position. So.
Do we have someone in that position? Did you
Yes.
say?
Yeah,
Who is
Tia.
I've heard really good things about her.
Yeah, she's doing a really good job for us. So, so the increased cost from making that a full-time position is $17,646. Under Public Works, Administration, Engineering, there's a decrease in the current year because we had some vacancies. It took us a few months to hire our Public Works Director and our Deputy Director. Now that those positions are filled. There's also a decrease next year. We have 1 vacant senior engineer position that's being filled by John Griffin on a temporary basis. He works for a company, and so we've got money in professional services, and so next year we're recommending more of the same. I think we put money in the budget to start in the fall at some point with the full-time position, but until then we're just going to kind of continue to operate things the way they are, and then we'll probably be bringing back some recommendations as far as what exactly we want to do with that position.
Is that based on workload?
Yeah. Yeah. So we're still, Steve and Gwen are still trying to figure out that engineering department staff, and so they'll have some recommendations about what we want to do there going forward. But right now I think things are working out okay, so we're just going to continue to keep it that way. In Public Works, Central Shop, there is a replacement vehicle recommended that's shared among several funds, general fund, gas tax, stormwater, water, sewer funds, and also a new vehicle diagnostic system. I think the one we have right now only diagnoses vehicles up to a certain year, and it's just getting older and older, and it's not able to really keep up. I think we've had staff that have brought in their personal diagnostic systems, which isn't a good practice. So I can't remember. I didn't put the years in here. I think I put them in the memo that I gave to the council. But all the vehicles we're recommending be replaced are very old. I think one of them was as old as 1988. So I can't remember this one specifically how old this one is, but they're all 150 plus, 1980, 1990. They're definitely in need of replacement. So those are some of the, I think, highlights from the general fund operations, the general fund departments. Other significant changes relate to transfers. And these are transfers in and out of the general fund from other departments. The first one is a loan from the general fund in the current year in the amount of $145,000 necessary to cover the debt service for the police building due to insufficient general government impact fee revenue. And we anticipate, based on Walmart and some other projects coming in next year, that we'll have enough money to pay that back. But if we don't, then there would be an outstanding loan there. And you know, this is a result of the city building the police building back when it did, and it relied on general government impact fees to pay that debt service. That's what was pledged, that's what's relied on, and it was fine until the building activity stopped. And the last 2 years, I've come to the council and warned that this was coming, that you know, we're getting to the point where unless we start to see building permit activity increase, the general fund is going to be on the hook for making these payments, and that's where we are right now. We've got a payment that we've got to make, and we need to borrow $145,000 to make that payment. So if we don't receive the revenues next year, then that would just continue to be there as an outstanding loan. But hopefully,
Is this part of the bond issue, that retiring this debt will be part of the new bond issue you're doing?
yes, yes.
Other than Walmart, what other projects were you looking at in anticipation of making enough money to pay this?
Well, there were, what do you say, 26 single-family permits, Sandy? There's those 26 single-family homes, and there were some of the other commercial projects, Family Dollar, McDonald's, theater, what else did you say?
One of the Galt Village Center pads that we anticipate.
All right, so a few miscellaneous projects.
Yeah, and I think about half of those sound pretty good, but then I think there's maybe another half that's maybe not so solid, unfortunately, like the theater project. So if we don't make the money for some reason, then it continues to come out of the general fund.
Every year, yeah. So right now, the debt service is over $300,000 a year. That would all come out of the general fund if we didn't have any building permit fee activity. Inez's recommendation, when we bring that back to you guys on June 4th, we'll reduce that debt service to $230,000 a year. So that'll give us some relief on that.
That would make it more manageable.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the first one. That's the loan from the general fund. Next one is, again, kind of an ongoing, we brought this to the council's attention last year. It hasn't gone away. This is with Fund 48, Solid Waste Fund. We continue to have problem balancing that fund, so it requires a transfer from the general fund to Fund 48. In the current year, that the amount of money necessary to balance it is $70,920. Next year, it's projected $120,000. That's an increase of $1,000 in the current year, and an additional $55,000 next year. Staff's recommendation is that we take a look at our administration fees, some of our other fees that we charge in order to fully recover the cost of service. The reason this is out of whack and out of balance is we're not recovering enough money on the fees that we charge. So we have a lot of time and effort spent in the billing process. We bill and collect for cow waste through our billing system. We have our staff in Public Works that manages various projects associated with solid waste, and so those are through the cost allocation plan, which abates out and cost allocates out those various costs. That's where we come up with, okay, this is the actual cost of service provided to solid waste, and we're not fully recovering all of our costs. And so we're recommending that we take a look at those fees and charges we charge to ratepayers in order to make sure that we adequately cover our costs. Otherwise, the general fund continues to subsidize that service, which is something that you don't want to do. And so we're going to be having some discussions with cow waste in the coming weeks. Actually, I think we have a meeting next week, or maybe actually this week, with cow waste to talk about maybe some things that we can do to reduce those those amounts and the subsidy from the general fund, but just to kind of put this on your radar screen. We'll probably be bringing something back to you guys in the next month or two to give you some recommendations about how we address that. We're just not in a position where we can continue to afford to not recover our cost of services. The next one is transfer from the general fund to the Culture and Recreation Fund necessary to balance the Culture and Recreation Fund in the amount of $111,000 in the current year and $46,000 next year. So like in previous years, the Culture and Recreation Fund does not fully support itself, cost of services. And so while this amount is less than what it's been in some prior years, it's still not fully covering its own costs, and so there's a need to transfer money in the amounts I just mentioned from the general fund to Culture and Recreation.
Do we feel pretty satisfied with the sales tax that we're getting now from the flea market?
I think we get about, remember, with the $46,000, something like that, from sales tax. I don't know what the latest, I know we've looked at this in the past. We've had the State Board of Equalization, come out on numerous occasions. I can't remember the last time they came out, but Armando, you want to?
We work with them constantly on collecting of the sales tax. We're getting the report from finance on a quarterly basis. I believe we're getting what we're going to get. I think we'd spend more money trying to get the extra $1,000 than we would trying to get that $1,000.
And why would we be doing that?
It takes time to go through those reports. Not everybody has access to those reports, only certain individuals. It would take my time to go through and actually go through each vendor and inspect that they're making their payment on a yearly basis. So once a year I can go through to see if they've made a payment.
Is it on any kind of a computer or anything?
It's in Excel format. You have to actually manually go in. I want to say there's over 4,000 names on that list. So you have to actually go there and physically find each one. It's not an easy process. If I locked myself in a room, it would take me a week and a half to do one quarter.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I mean, without doing anything else, having to manually go through to see if they were here at this period of time, if they were here in that period of time, it's just.
What about getting help from the state? There for a while they were coming out and, they were really paying attention to see if the vendors that were supposed to collect sales tax were actually doing it.
From BOE.
We still have help from Board of Equalization. We report to them on a weekly basis. We send information out to them.
Do they come out to us, though?
I don't know when the last time they were out. She's saying that they call on a regular basis inquiring about vendors.
Call.
Yes.
They don't come out. They used to come out. We had someone that was there.
Right. We did have people assigned to us, but I'm sure with cutbacks they don't come out either.
Maybe we could request. I mean, it wouldn't hurt to ask.
Sure.
I think if we compared the sales tax from the flea market to some of the other businesses, it would seem like it was lacking. I mean, I know you don't have time to do that, but when I see that we need the revenue, I know we get a lot of it just from renting out the spaces. But then, I hate to see us losing money, and also the businesses that are here, they have to collect the sales tax they're supposed to, and that's only fair.
I know the city's talked about it, but is any more thought been given to expanding the hours of operation or days of operation at the market? I know it was discussed several
years ago. We expanded the hours of operation a couple years ago and didn't really have a lot of success with that. We got more complaints from the vendors. We have talked about expanding the days. We actually talked about just recently about doing a survey with vendors to figure out, which ones might be interested in coming out on a Monday or a Thursday or some other day. And I think, we're still interested in exploring that. I think what we've been concentrating on in the last 6 months is really focusing on our Tuesday and Wednesday, making sure that they're successful. We had a little bit of a downturn earlier this year. Things are really starting to come back up. And so I think, Mondo, what's your kind of plan?
Currently, I think that we need to just stay the course with our Tuesday and Wednesday market. I think we need to keep those 2 days healthy. before we look to expand on another day or adding expanding the times.
Then you're talking about increasing staff time and.
Right.
Right,
I
right.
mean, you would increase your budget lines.
Right.
It also brings a lot of money to the city, and with people buying gasoline and
Well, I think the
other
idea,
things
I
too.
think the idea of doing the survey is, you know, at some point would be the first step and probably the most important because it's going to tell you whether it looks like it's going to be a go or not anyway.
Yeah.
I think it makes sense. I think Armando's got the right solution, which is let's work and focus on trying to solidify those existing markets. But once we get to a point where we think we were there, then absolutely, I think look at expanding, and because it's a huge revenue source for the city, and if we could capitalize on some existing vendors or maybe open it up to something different on those days. I mean, that market basically sits there empty for 5 days out of the week. And so if we can capitalize on some of that additional revenue, the trick has always been getting the vendors because they each have their schedules. They go and they travel at markets all over the state, and so they've already got their Mondays set and their Thursdays set, and maybe that Mondays is their day off, and so it's hard to get them to one, it's hard to get the vendors to commit, and then two, it's hard to get the people.
I think we've done some really good job in advertising and marketing this year. Are we going to continue that?
Yeah, we have the same amount of money.
If you approve the budget, we will.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so the last one on the transfers is this is associated with the cost allocation plan. There was a reduction in support services from the general fund to our water and wastewater division, so that means that's less money that's transferred from water and wastewater to the general fund. So the net result is it's less revenue, less money to the general fund, but it's a truly accurate reflection of the time spent, and so if we're not spending time there, then there's no payment. So part of that is when we have vacancies, our public works director or a deputy director, they're not there, so they're not charging time to that fund, and so that results in some reductions there, other things. So that results in a hit in, this is just the current fiscal year numbers. We didn't change any of the cost allocation, the abatement assumptions for next year. We only did it in the current year, right?
What's the delay in the state revolving fund? Steve, you said there was a delay from the state revolving fund.
In our capital improvement program, you might have noted that we're moving Cost Well project from the current year to 13-14, and we're moving the subsequent water treatment system that would go with that to the next fiscal year. And two things is we're not shovel ready yet. We're still in the design, environmental, and property acquisition phase. So we're kind of right sizing when we're actually planning to deliver that. And secondly, we're just now in the preliminary application process for the funding, state revolving fund loans to actually fund the construction. And until we get that approved, we can't move forward either. So everything's sort of slipping one fiscal year.
So is it because of them that there's a delay in the funding?
A little bit of chicken and the egg. We can't build it till we have the funding, but until we're sort of shovel ready, they won't give us the funding. We are having ongoing dialogue for both the wastewater project as well as the Cost Well set of projects to make sure we're in line. There was some recent press coverage of how California is sort of last in the nation on getting their SRF funding, which is actually a federal government pass-through out and spent. So we're thinking that maybe there'll be a positive backlash from that. The state's going to start trying to spend that fund balance down, and we hope to be in line for the front of the, be at the front of the line for some of that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's kind of a summary of the general fund. Went through the revenues, expenditures, and the transfers. Now we'll get into some of our other funds that we have in the city. Another significant one is Culture and Recreation, Parks and Recreation, Fund 6. Revenues, overall, there's an increase in the current year of $12,800, and next year we're anticipating an increase of almost $240,000. That would bring the total estimate in the current year to about $3.4 million and almost $3.7 million next year. The major drivers in the numbers include the market revenue decrease in the current year. We talked about some of the struggles the market had earlier in the year, so we're projecting a decrease of $127,000 in the current year. But holding the same for next year, we're optimistic that the recent trend of a stabilized market will continue into next year. We have a good day out of the market today, Mondo? Kim? Yeah? 95%, so that's good. That basically means we're full. Most we can do now is about 96, 97? 96. So, sorry, 93. So that means we've oversold some spots. Yes. So that's good.
Is it mostly the weather that affects?
Honestly, being at the market for the last 20 years, I have no idea what's going on. January and February were the oddest January and February I've ever seen. Had decent weather, and for some reason, with reduced rates, vendors didn't show up. As soon as we raised the rents back up to their normal rate in March, they all showed up. We started increasing. We're trying to find out. We're talking to other markets around this area. Headed down to the National Flea Market Association convention, and this is the norm right now. We're all trying to figure out what's going on.
Did you shuffle some things around at that time too? Was that the same time?
We did. We did have an increase due to adding produce to our Tuesday.
Right, okay.
Expanding our produce on Tuesday. So that's why we're at that 95% right now. So we did make some changes. We saw this coming. We tried to get ahead of it, and looks like we did.
Do you think the construction on the interchange, did that affect it very much?
I don't believe it did.
I think it helps now that it's open.
Yeah.
You know, there's no backups. Very rarely do we have backups, and it's just a nice entryway into the city.
Yeah.
So definitely going to be a good thing. We also have increased revenue from additional sports tournaments that we've added. I think we've talked about this in the past. Just a year ago, we were only about 3 sports tournaments, and we had 30-something scheduled for this year. I think we've had a few that have canceled, but we're still, you know, up there a lot from where we were prior, so that's helping us. That also brings in more revenue for concessions and other things. Special interest classes as well are expanding, and so we have more special interest classes that are bringing in additional revenue. The largest impact to this, the reason why you see a bigger impact to the budget for next year is for the SOAR program, both the summer SOAR program and the after-school program. I think the revenue estimate was, what, $140-something thousand, something to that extent, and so that has additional revenue, but there's also additional costs, so they offset one another. So on the revenue side, you see that increase, and it doesn't necessarily bring additional money into the city, but it provides an important service for the community, and it's not costing us anything. We're covering our costs on that program, which is important. So we got a lot of positive comments and feedback on that program, and we're gearing up to start the summer program here in a few weeks.
Mr. Behrman? Excuse me a second. I want to go back real quick to the recreation. It says that the recommendation here is that 2 part-time sport coordinator positions be reduced from 36 hours to 28. And that the frozen recreation coordinator position be filled. Is that the one that was just recently vacated?
You're actually jumping.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not. I don't know where you're at.
I was just doing revenue. Now the next slide is right where you're talking about. Is
4 was below
expenditures.
on mine, I thought.
Sorry.
No, it's my fault. I apologize. Yeah, see, I got slower here. It looked like you passed it. On my package, it's after.
Gotcha. Sorry about that.
Your fault.
It is my fault.
I am following along.
So, in answer to your question, I think the second bullet point there under recreation, it talks about the frozen recreation coordinator position.
Yes, sir.
Is recommended to be unfrozen and funded next year. And it's also recommended that 2 part-time sports coordinator positions hours be reduced from 36 to 28, and there's also a reduction of a sports coordinator to a recreation worker 2, total net increase of $39,606. So I think the answer to your question was we had an individual that was a sports coordinator position that that left. We've filled that position with another employee right now. So there are currently.
You're talking about another one on top of that position then?
No, there are currently 2 part-time sports coordinator positions whose hours would be reduced. And that's to help pay for
the
full-time position.
Now, was this not a part-time position before the coordinator position?
Which one? The recreation coordinator or the sports coordinator?
The sports coordinator.
Sports coordinator, there was 2 part-time and then 1 temporary, I believe. And then we just added another part-time sports coordinator for our after-school SOAR program as well. So it's all very confusing. Sports coordinators moving all over the place. But so right now we have 2 part-time sports coordinator positions, 1 temporary sports coordinator position, and then we just added another part-time sports coordinator to manage our after-school programs, the SOAR program.
Right.
So the recommendation is to take the 1 temporary sports coordinator position, reduce that, so it's no longer a sports coordinator, it's going to make it a recreation worker 2. The existing part-time sports coordinator positions are not going to change other than a reduction in hours, and then we're going to add a full-time recreation coordinator position. And the net effect financially of all that is an increase to the budget of about $40,000. Did that make sense?
Oh, yeah, it did. Yeah. Thank you.
So that explains that. Did you have any other questions about that?
Not that we can cover here. Thank you.
So let me back up to the top of the slide, which is taking a look at our expenditures. So the recommended budget increase in the current year is about $34,000, and next year is $287,000. And this is kind of where I'm going through what makes up that difference. The first one we just talked about, which is the full-time rec coordinator, the part-time positions, and that net impact is about $40,000. On the SOAR after-school program, again, we talked about the revenue side. That again is an additional expenditure, so that increases the budget due to that. We also have increased costs. I said there's increased revenues from concessions. There's also increased costs from concessions and increased costs for running the tournaments. We have to add more bodies, more part-time hours to run those tournaments. So the revenues more than offset the costs. But when you have, so you're seeing the revenues go up, the expenditures also go up. But again, they're fully covering, and for the sports tournaments, they're more than covering the costs of that program. So we're getting some net revenue, and the real value in the sports tournaments is we're getting people staying at our hotels, eating in our restaurants, supporting local businesses. So you not only get the revenue directly from the tournaments, you're getting the indirect impacts of bringing people into our community. Which is
I talked to the owner, owner of the Best Western, and he could really feel the impact of the tournament. Filled up his motel.
It's good.
Yeah,
and
good.
Helps the business, but also helps us because we get TOT tax, transient occupancy tax, off of that. So it's a good program.
It is.
Let's see. So in addition to some of these a lot of these costs that are going up also have the offsetting revenue. So you see them on both sides of the ledger: the concessions, the special interest classes, the tournaments, and so forth. And one new item that we're recommending is replacement scoreboards out at the sports complex. You ever played out there? Those scoreboards haven't worked in probably a decade or more, and so we're recommending replacing those. And Parks and Rec, Armando and his staff are working on putting together a program that will allow us to get sponsorships, so we can have sponsorships, under or over the scoreboards to fully fund that. So we've got $15,000 shown in revenue, $15,000 shown in expense. So it should, hopefully, we're successful and we can get those funded through community sponsorships. And Steve has been working with Armando to develop a sponsorship policy that will allow us to do that. So we're bringing that forward. The other change in Parks and Recreation is Aquatic Center. There's some additional maintenance repairs in addition to what we talked about under the CIP. There's some under the operating budget. Increasing costs for some pool vacuum repairs, the gel coat of our large slide, and so forth. So that's the other divisions within Parks and Recreation are not. There's no recommended changes, so these are the ones that are recommending changes. Any other questions in there? Okay, the next other funds that we have, Fund 5, Fund 7, this is the water funds, some recommended changes there, increase in building and repair maintenance, some roof repairs at various water treatment facilities and so forth around the city are recommended for next year. We also have a new vehicle just for water, and then we have the water share of the central shop vehicle. Again, this is one of the very old vehicles. In Fund 7, there's some savings in the current year due to some vacant positions for our senior maintenance mechanic and our part-time positions. But more than that, we are recommending increasing professional services in both years relating to consultant services for project management, SCADA costs, which is, I can't remember what SCADA stands for, but it's our system that allows us to monitor operations out at the plant, both water and wastewater, sends off alarms and bells if there's a leak somewhere or something's not working properly. It notifies our staff and kind of keeps things all automated and remote access and so forth. And we want to improve that system, do some additional programming, and really get even more out of it than we currently have.
What is the significance in terms of the changes, in terms of the increased cost? I mean, it doesn't show up here without going through here this.
Mr. Clarkson, do you want to come up and talk about the recommended improvements to SCADA? And
no, just cost. I don't need to know anything about the improvements.
You just want to know what
just what the costs are.
Just because you know what the recommend. I think it's about $25,000.
Yes, council. In the wastewater, it's $20,000, and the water is approximately $10,000.
Okay, thank you.
Now for bonus points, what's SCADA?
What does SCADA stand for?
Oh, let me take a shot at that.
Control and data acquisition.
There you go.
Very good.
All right.
Give yourself an A. And while we're on SCADA, as you recall, we are moving forward with a contract for a new fiber optic cable, and these two need each other to work optimally.
Okay, so what else do we have? We also have some capital amounts for wastewater, for a replacement vehicle, and also their share of the central shop replacement vehicle. So, the other thing I skipped over is under parks. There's a replacement vehicle under parks as well. So there's 4 total trucks being replaced next year. Water, wastewater, central shop, and parks. Those are the new vehicles that are.
Do those go out to bid? How do we purchase those vehicles?
Typically, or of late I should say, we're taking advantage of the ability to piggyback on state purchasing contracts, where they go out and maybe purchase 300 vehicles statewide of a similar class, and we can find a bid that either another local agency or a state contract list, we can just go out and say, give us 1 too at that price, rather than we bid 1 and you don't get much economy of scale.
Right.
Now, the downside can be that unless we have a local contract provider, not too many car dealerships in Galt, but is sometimes those are out-of-area providers that are, getting those state contracts. So we take a look at that as well.
Okay.
So what will we do with the old vehicles? Will we just auction those off somewhere, or how are we going to dispose of those?
Push them off a cliff, preferably.
I understand that, but there's still our charities and stuff.
The
to take
mosquito vector district will probably charge us more for keeping mosquitoes out when we quit smoking around town with our old vehicles. But in all seriousness, very little residual value left in some of these vehicles. In fact, they're probably not even legal to resell in California in some cases. But if there is a salvage value, we will put those out to auction. And I don't know, Aiden, if we've used a firm to do that, or if we just surplus them.
Okay, that was my question. That's all I wanted to know. Is what
We get whatever we can out of the old lemons.
Okay, that was my question. Okay, thank you.
Okay, these are the 2 items that are listed on your sheet that were passed out. The first is include $2,000 in next year's budget for the volunteer luncheon that we did this last year, and we just didn't include money next year, so we're recommending the council add that money back. I think the date is September 11th at Brewster's. Oh, we're doing it?
Yeah.
So, and then the second recommendation I already mentioned, which is to move $40,000 from fiscal year 12-13 to 13-14 for housing element and zoning matrix update. I think Sandy corrected me. It's really for the zoning matrix amount for next year. So just moving that money from the current year to next year. Is that the right amount? $40,000. Yeah. So those are the highlights. Obviously didn't go through all the line items, and I know staff that hasn't spoken yet feels really left out, so I'm sure they'd appreciate you asking them lots of questions.
Start on this end over here.
Yeah.
Oh, start with the big guy.
But the recommendation is that the council receive this, the recommended adjustments to the biannual budget, solicit public input, ask any questions, provide staff any direction on any changes, modifications to the recommended budget, and then direct staff, if there are no other changes, direct staff to make the changes reflected in the sheet that was passed out and bring the budget back at the next meeting on June 4th for adoption.
Can I, excuse me, go ahead, Mark.
Quick question about the CCSD pass-through. Since that was originally paid through RDA, how are we handling it?
And Ed, you want to address that?
That currently is included in the recognized obligation payment schedule, so every 6 months we include that in that schedule, and we receive some of the amounts from the county to address that. We are still reviewing that at this point, but at this time we are paying that from what was previously known as tax increment.
Thank you.
I just want to go back real quick with the police department. We have a new K-9, and we're going to get another one, I assume, because we have 2 officers that have been hired for that. Can you tell me specifically how the city is helping support that K-9 program?
Chief, you want to answer that question about monies in the budget for the K-9 program?
It's actually in the budget under Fund 1515, Professional Services. And we have 6270 allocated, roughly 3135 for each dog. And
270, you said?
$6,270.
$6,270.
For next year?
Right. Yes.
And what is that meant to cover?
That's for veterinary supplies, food, and also we have equipment as far as canine.
Training?
Training is separate. Training comes back out underneath training.
Okay, so that would be an additional amount?
Exactly.
The K-9 program for their training program.
When you say equipment, can you give me specific what kind
Are
of
you
equipment?
talking leashes, collars, everything from food, anything that the dog needs as far as for canine equipment?
Any other questions, council? Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
So the recommendation is then we incorporate the changes that we present to you tonight, bring back the budget for at the June 4th meeting for consideration and adoption by the City Council.
Yes. Thank you.
Second.
Call for the vote, please, Liz. Mayor Singleton?
Aye.
Councilmember Payne?
Aye.
Councilmember Campion?
Aye.
Councilmember Cruz?
Aye.
Mayor Powers? Aye. Okay, now we're the Galt Police Officers Association Memorandum of Understanding, Galt Public Service Unit Memorandum of Understanding, and the City of Galt Personnel Manual.
Yeah.
We need to
Let's-
take a break.
Break.
Oh.
I was going to say, all right.
I just say break, 5-minute break.
Huh?
We'll say 5-minute break.
Oh. We'll take a break.
Yeah.
What are you doing with that? What's Chris gonna do with it? I'm not sure. I think he's got a license. So you need to ask.
What, who? I missed the conversation and I think I'm glad. Thank you, by the way, for those. Actually took all six. My hand is actually swelling.
Seems dark here, huh?
Dan kind of scared me with that big old box you brought in.
I don't know if I can get it actually started.
It's already on the agenda.
It is?
Oh, but everybody stays for the presentation. Everybody stays for the next one,
What? No, Marcus not. We got money, honey. You told me you could. I did this. I just gave it back. I had messed up my discretionary fund. I sent everybody an email. Somebody give me $50. I did too.
Well, I had money, but I was going to use it for something, but I don't know whether I can or not.
Oh.
It's because it's in there.
It wouldn't be extended this fiscal year, so I have well, it's not a can, but you guys have to approve it. So, we'll just, go.
Darn.
We all back? Okay. Oh, wait. We're missing a city manager.
We're good. Here we go.
Here we go.
We can
Let's
go.
go.
Come on, let's go.
All right. That's you, Paula.
No. Actually, I'm going to give the next presentation.
Pardon me?
I'm going to give the next presentation.
All right. You are?
Yeah. Are you ready?
Paula.
You don't look like Paula, but go ahead.
So my presentation will be much shorter than Jason's. But I have a lot less information to cover. This item concerns some side letter agreements with the Galt Police Officers Association, the Galt Public Service Unit, and side letter agreements are basically just amendments to the existing MOUs, and some proposed changes to the Galt Personnel Manual. The Council will not be asked to act on these items tonight. Tonight is just to review the items with you, to have the Council provide any comments, and then subject to your direction, these will come back at the next City Council meeting on June 4th for action. So as the Council is aware, most city employees have not received a pay increase since January of 2009, but actually have seen significant reductions in their paychecks over that period of years. The reductions have been through furloughs, increases in medical premiums, for the GPOA members, reduction in overtime payments. Most of our employees are now paying more towards their CalPERS contribution, an increase of 2% that began in 2011. And then to cap it all off, the federal withholding tax went up 2% in January of this year. So, because of all of those reductions, the city manager has proposed several changes to the labor MOUs and the personnel manual in order to reduce the financial burden on city employees. And the proposal has three parts. The first part is a proposal to return all regular employees to full-time hours. This would benefit the employees by restoring their paychecks to pre-furlough levels and by increasing the work hours available to handle job duties. One of the things we've heard from some of our employees is because of the furlough and less hours on the job, actually it increases the stress on the employees by less hours to perform the same amount of tasks. If approved, all furloughs would end on July 1, 2013 for GPOA and GPSU. The current salary reduction for furloughs is just over 2% for GPOA and 3.5% for GPSU employees. The unrepresented employees have been off furloughs since July of 2012. The second part of the proposal relates to health insurance premiums, and the health insurance premiums continue to increase. When we changed to CalPERS Health in September of 2012, we did see a significant reduction in those premiums. However, there is anticipation that there will be increases in the coming years. What the city currently proposes is to increase the contribution for health insurance premiums for unrepresented employees and for GPSU members effective July 1, 2013, and then to absorb 100% of the increase of the premium for Kaiser HMO or Blue Shield Net Value HMO, whichever is higher, that becomes effective on January 1, 2014. There's a chart at the back of the staff report that shows the changes that would be absorbed by the city. One of the benefits in making these changes to the city's premiums is that it would put the city's contribution at an equal level for all employees within those groups, within GPSU and within unrepresented. The employee contribution amount would vary based upon which plan the employee selects. The GPOA declined the health care proposal, so there would be no change in the medical contribution amounts on July 1, 2013 for those members. The third part of the proposal relates to paid overtime for GPOA members. The current GPOA MOU provides that employees are only paid for overtime hours after accruing 200 hours of compensatory time off. The city lifted this restriction on a temporary basis in March, and it is now proposed to remove the restriction on paid overtime for the remainder of the current MOU, which would be from July 1 of this year through June 30th, 2014. If approved, the employees would have a choice between receiving paid overtime or accruing compensatory time off. GPSU has voted to accept the first two proposals, the proposals relating to the elimination of furloughs and the health insurance premiums, and GPOA has voted to accept the first proposal relating to the elimination of furloughs and the third proposal relating to paid overtime. The cost of these proposals would be $127,000 in cost for the elimination of furloughs, and the cost for the increased city contribution for health care premiums would be $106,000 for a total cost of $233,000. If the City Council supports these side letter agreements and the changes to the personnel manual, as I indicated, these changes will come back on June 4th to adopt a resolution approving both side letter agreements and to adopt a resolution changing the Galt personnel manual. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions the council has.
I have a question. Jason, can you kind of give us a timeline on this? I mean, first of all, I'm thinking, isn't this covered in negotiations with the unions, or how are we doing that outside the negotiations? But the other thing is, can you go back to when we asked the employees to take the furlough days and sort of bring us up to date as to what you're proposing now?
Sure. We started our current contract almost 2 years ago. So it would have been July 1, 2011, I believe. It was a 3-year contract. And so it had furloughs that would have been in place for the 3 years. Last year, so it would have been around July 1, 2012, so a year into it, we made the changes to the CalPERS Health. We made changes from our current health care provider to CalPERS Health, and we had proposed some modifications back then, and that is when the unrepresented employees agreed to come off furloughs in exchange for paying higher rates for their medical, and most significantly, they agreed to take on 100% of the increased cost of the health care premiums as of January 1, 2013.
And that was the unrepresented?
That was unrepresented. The other two groups did not agree to do that, so we switched them to CalPERS Health, but the funding, the mechanism for them to pay for their health care insurance stayed the same, where any increase was split 50-50 between the employee and the employer. So that happened about a year ago, last year, July 2012. Then kind of forward, I guess, to earlier this year. Well, let me back up a little bit. Every year in the MOU, it included a provision that we would reevaluate the furloughs. Prior to each year's budget process, we would go back to the bargaining table with the groups and say, here's where we are financially. If we're able to afford it, then
and that's what we're doing.
and that is what we're doing now, is required as part of the contract. We do an annual evaluation. We did it last year, and we weren't recommending that we make any changes to the MOU at that time. This year we are. So about the beginning of this year, we started having discussions with the employees about, okay, it's been, it's coming up on 2 years of the contract. I know the furloughs have been hard on a lot of the employees. We've got some changes that we want to make to the health care provisions as far as that goes, and get everybody kind of, one of the goals we have on the health care is to get it so that the city is paying one set amount for family, for employee plus one, and employee only. Right now we have, city pays different amounts if you're on different groups, if you subscribe to Kaiser or Blue Shield, and it's kind of a mess, and it's a pain for the finance to kind of manage that. It's hard for us to budget. And so one of our goals was to get everybody where we just say, and this is what most cities do, they say, city, we're going to pay X. Employee, you choose whatever health care plan you want, and you're going to pay the difference if you want a more expensive plan. And so that was one of our goals in changing some of the health care provisions. We also are interested in giving the employees a little bit of relief on the health care premiums as well. So that's why we were recommending, for this coming July, is to increase the city's contribution, and then also to take on the additional cost of next year's rate increase that would go into effect of January 2014, and in exchange for that the employees agree to kind of, get everybody on the same plan, at least having one city contribution amount. So the recommendation kind of earlier, when we first started having these conversations with the employee groups earlier this year, was one to talk about getting off furloughs, was kind of recognition of, hey, it's been a long haul, we really want to see if we can get off of that, try to maybe improve morale, and then two, to make the changes on the health care provisions, and we kind of did it under the contract language that requires an annual evaluation of those furloughs. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was confused as to why we were doing this and not being in negotiations.
Right.
I'd forgotten the part that you mentioned, that we agreed to review it every year and see how we were financially.
Right.
Thank you.
I think the other one point I do want to add is that when we entered into the MOUs, the furlough for GPSU was 5% and 3.5% for GPOA. And then even though last year those unions did not accept the risk associated with the health care premiums like the unrepresented, we did take some of the savings from those health care benefits, or the change to CalPERS, and we reduced the furlough from 5 to 3.5% for GPSU, and for GPOA we went from 3.5 to just over 2%. So we did make a slight reduction last year during the reopener, and so we're now at the last reopener under the existing 3-year document.
I have to ask you this. Do you feel comfortable that we have the revenue coming in to cover the additional costs after just reviewing it?
Well, you saw the numbers like I did.
But I want to know what you think.
I mean, frankly, we don't. I mean, we hope to. Looking at Walmart and so forth coming in, I think what we're looking at more than anything else is it's been a long road for our employees. It's been since 4 or 5 years since anybody's had a raise. They've had cutbacks they're paying more into their medical, paying more into their retirement. They've been on furloughs, and so I think in light of kind of where we are as a city, I'm recommending the change. It's not that I feel 100% confident with that the future is going to be all rosy, but I think for the costs that we're talking about here and the benefits to the employees overall, that's why it's being recommended.
So you think that if things that we anticipate happening, such as Walmart. If they don't happen, we will still be able to recover our situation that we're in without the additional revenues.
Well, I think, what we do have is we're coming to the end next year, will be the end of the 3-year term, and so we'll be back in negotiations with the group, next year. And so if things are worse, things are different, we'll be able to evaluate that and see about making some changes at that time. So it's nothing that, now you'd hate to be in a situation where, you give back the furloughs and then you're going to reinstitute the furloughs a year later, but things change, conditions change, revenues change. If Walmart did pull out for some reason, that would be certainly a legitimate, I think, understandable reason that the employees would say, okay, we're willing to go back to the table and talk about doing something different. So I think we're making a good faith effort to try to recognize and try to give something back, and hopefully the employees would, if things did change materially or things were worse or didn't materialize as we thought, they'd be willing to enter into those discussions with us again.
Well, and I support your feelings that the employees have worked with the situation and they deserve to be rewarded for that. And I think probably they've worked harder than they ever have under the situation. So we'll see. I feel that things are going to get better. I really do. But I think we have to look at both sides of the coin. Our heart says we want to do it, but we don't want to be that city in the news that's next on the line to file bankruptcy. And I guess I'm thinking that would not happen, even if we don't have Walmart or some of the other things coming forward, that we have enough foundation that we're not going to be the next city to file bankruptcy.
Yeah, we're not anywhere near bankruptcy right now, and I think that's the value of having a solid, stable reserve fund, that it gives you time to make changes and work things out. We don't have a lot of debt, which is what the cities that have gotten themselves into trouble have significant loads of debt on them, and we're fortunate we don't have a lot of that. And so I think that we would be able to make the adjustments in the amount of time that we had to, if things didn't materialize, things continued down, because we have a reserve, we're able to, it gives us time to make those adjustments. So not to say they wouldn't be painful adjustments, that there still might be some tough decisions left ahead of us, but that we'd have time to make those changes.
Okay. And there's nothing to say in our budget that things can't get better either.
Right.
So instead of, you can look at both sides of the coin. And also we do have managers out there that are always cognizant of their budgets, and we've seen savings in all of what they do every year. So I don't think it's a number that's really written in stone either.
I think it's a very cautious approach, to restoring some normality as to what they used to have, several years ago. And I agree, that they've been hit every single year with something, and I think that it certainly provides, there's time if adjustments need to be made. But I think it's a good approach.
Any other thoughts?
I just think it's a wise idea. It gives our employees breathing room. As was said, they've done a lot as far as giving things up for the period of time they were asked for. Our time to give back a little bit.
And I think it says a lot that you're looking out for them. I agree with you, Mark. Okay, so do we have a, hold on, go back.
There's actually no action required of the council unless you want to provide direction. If not,
Because that's coming back.
We'll do this back at the next meeting with the budget.
Okay. Then,
She's got her microphone ready.
always ready.
Yeah.
City of Galt actuarial evaluation, actuarial, okay.
Sure, thank you.
Evaluation of other post-employment benefit liabilities as of July 1st, 2012. Paula. You're on.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you tonight is the final report of our actuarial evaluation for the city's OPEB liabilities, and as this was mentioned in the presentation earlier, and a lot of discussion about CalPERS Health. We moved to CalPERS Health last September, and a part of that program is that we need to offer retiree health, and also comes along with that is an evaluation that needs to be done to determine what our unfunded liabilities will be. And we brought a report to you in June of 2012, and that was like preliminary, and this is the final report. Now that we've moved to CalPERS, we know how many retirees are on the plan and so on and so forth. So this is the estimation as of now with the final numbers. So before you tonight is we're asking that you accept the report, but then also provide direction as to the funding. There are two options. One is the pay-as-you-go, and that is basically paying for your retiree health costs on a monthly basis, just paying CalPERS, and that's at this time about $1,500 a month. But the other option is to contribute to your annual required contribution, and that is to keep ahead of the game and put money into a fund so that we can pay those obligations and we wouldn't find ourselves, the city, in the situation that other agencies are in that have never really funded these liabilities. So for this year, the amount is, both years is approximately $65,000, and it's in the budget for approval, which will be brought to you obviously on June 4th. And also at that time, the finance director will be bringing you recommendations on the account on where the funds would be placed. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer those.
What do we currently do for retiree health benefits?
Well, up until now, before we moved to CalPERS Health, our retirees paid their full premium. And since we moved to CalPERS Health, the city pays a minor contribution, which will increase a little bit every year. So that is why we need to either fund it as we go or put money aside for future costs.
So as I mentioned in the budget, there's $130,000 set aside that would then be designated for this pre-funding amount that would be set aside in a trust fund that finance will be bringing back at the next meeting if the council agrees. The alternative is that we just fund it as a pay-as-you-go, meaning the current retirees that participate in the program, the city pays a very small amount, and again, the total amount for the city is about $1,500 a year. So each year that amount would go up a little bit. What Paul is saying is that we could set money aside now. I put money away in the piggy bank in this trust fund that we can't touch, that'll be ready. That way in 20 years from now, when those costs are much more, we've got money available to fund those, as opposed to what a lot of cities have done, which is nothing. They just pay as the bills come due. They don't set any money aside for those future obligations. And so, you know, the council has the choice. The city of Lodi just went through this discussion. The reason it's big news right now is because, is it GASB 54? 45 that requires, as part of the annual audit process, you have to actually identify what your OPEB obligation is, what this retiree health future liability obligation is, and you have to show it on your financial statements. Before, it was there, but nobody knew what it was, nobody accounted for it, it was not shown anywhere, and Lodi just went through this where they showed a $3 million OPEB obligation on their books, and they've just been doing pay-as-you-go, and so they had a discussion recently among their council about whether they wanted to start setting money aside for their retiree health care, just continue to do it on a pay-as-you-go basis, and they decided to just continue it on a pay-as-you-go basis. So that's certainly an option, but our recommendation is that you set that money aside for those future obligations. And
planning ahead, correct?
Right.
But you and I had a discussion about that, and wasn't 65 grand a year like just an astronomical, ridiculous figure that somebody just pulled out of the air? Well, I mean, sort of. I mean, that kind of, because
it seems like a lot. Because if you think right now we're paying $1,500 a year is not very much, right? And even when in 20 years from now, we're not going to be paying much for retiree health. So in my mind, it seems like it's still a lot of money to set aside for an obligation that's way in the future. But these, these actuarials, these accountants, they do this analysis and they run these scenarios out and they say, based on, this rate of return, based on this number of retirees, based on all these assumptions, and they've got this methodology that they use that calculates what your obligation is. It comes up with these numbers, and to me, it does seem like a lot, but that's what that's the official number that will show up on our financial audits. If we don't fund the full amount, then it will show up as an outstanding future liability obligation on there. So and it is what it is. But the council. And there, in addition to options of pre-funding, setting the whole amount aside, or pay-as-you-go, you could set aside any amount that you want up to that full amount. So if you only wanted to fund half of it, you could do that. What happens if you don't do that is then you show on your financial audits there's an unfunded liability, and two, you have to use a lesser discount rate and interest rate because that's I guess a requirement of this is that I think we're assuming, a 7%, and I think if we don't fully fund it, then we have to use a 5% discount rate, which then makes a difference in our assumptions. So
does it increase your annual? So instead of paying the $1,500, if you paid half, what would it be?
It doesn't change the annual amount.
Oh, it still does.
That stays the same because that's what you're actually paying for your health care for your retirees now. So if you have an employee that's retired now, the city's paying, I don't know what it's, $5 a month for a retiree, right? I mean, is that what it is? It's something really small. So that doesn't change. What changes is the amount of money you're setting aside for the person that retires 10 years from now, and you're going to have to pay not $5 a month, you're going to have to pay $50 a month. And so you're setting that money aside for that. So right now, pay-as-you-go is $1,500. 10 years from now, that pay-as-you-go might be $70,000 because you have more people that are retiring. Our contribution goes up a little bit every year, and so over time, Lodi's pay-as-you-go is about $600,000 a year.
So does this act to level the cost then, is what you're saying? By paying it annually, the full amount, 64.
That's a lot of money in 20 years. 65 grand in 20 years. That's a chunk of change.
But does that act to level it though?
That's essentially. Now I don't know what it's called, the ARC, which is that $65,000. That amount could increase over time, but I guess it's a matter of what you're going to do is we're going to set aside this $65,000, and then when the $1,500 right now that in the current year that comes due, we're going to take our 65 and use it to pay off our current year obligation. So every year we put in 65, 65, 65, and that 1,500 goes up. We're going to have a little nest egg that we can take out of our our account and pay for our outstanding annual obligations. And the assumption is that if we do it like that, our annual obligation is probably going to be flatter. It's probably going to level the payment as opposed to starting here, then going up, to a huge amount. So I don't know. Does that? I mean, I'm kind of winging it here. Our financial experts over here.
I think that's accurate. When we were actually reviewing the report, we are trying to avoid having a major increase in our if we were to actually go through the pay-as-you-go. We have seen where you were talking about the concern about other cities, and this is definitely one of them, where on their financial statements there's this liability out there that says it's unfunded. And so when you look at other cities and they're trying to figure out how to pay for that, because all of a sudden it's now in their financial statements, you turn to that page and there's a disclosure statement now that says you have this obligation and you have not put money aside. We're trying to avoid that. I think what you said earlier is we are trying to plan ahead, and whatever that contribution is, we're not locked in. It's council at this point decides that we want to go with pre-funding this year's and next year's contribution up to about $130,000. You can actually change that election at some future date. When the amount becomes unaffordable, if it ever does, that election it can be changed. You can say, you know what, we have enough right now, we can't afford this right now. So that's the good thing about what we will be presenting to you, I believe, at the next meeting, is by the recommendation that we'll be presenting to council is going with PARS, and you can basically have, I believe it was a 60-day, 90-day cancellation, and actually say, you know, we're going to change this. We're not going to go with pre-fund anymore. This year has been a bad year. If you go with an agency like PERS, you're stuck. It's basically you're there. So this gives us that wiggle room that if our financial condition does change, we're protecting ourselves by saying we need another avenue to go. So we ran.
But once the money's in there,
correct.
You can't take it out.
You can't take it out. That is a trust. That is a trust, but it could affect future contribution amounts. So once the money is there, it's set aside. It is a trust fund.
Contribution.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
So does the $1,500 a month come out of 65 grand?
Yeah. Yeah, it would come out of 65 grand, yes.
Oh, it's the $1,500 a year?
Yeah. Right now. It's going to go up every year, but yeah.
Right. And
We just started it, so it's
and
pretty.
some of the assumptions that you see in the report were how many retirees will continue to elect to have the medical coverage through the city, how many retirees we expect to have coverage, you know, and so there are different assumptions and so forth in the report that's presented to you this evening.
Did I understand you say, though, if we back out, if we go in there for a couple of years and we back out, it's reflected on our financial statement in a negative way or not?
Well, anytime you have an obligation that you have not set money aside that has not been funded, that will be a disclosure statement in our financials.
But if we do it for 2 years and then decide we can't continue that plan, then will it show up in our financial statement as an unfunded liability?
If there is an unfunded liability, that will show. That is correct.
Even though we put in.
If you have money, if you have $130,000 in there, but in 2 years, if the liability is $150,000, it will show $20,000 that's unfunded. So that is the requirement of GASB 45. That the liability of other post-employment benefits, that has to be disclosed in our financial statements.
And this money that we set aside can draw interest, did you say?
It is. It will,
Did you
yes.
say like 7%?
Well, that's going to be the assumption that we're using. Again, that's over the life. That's the period. I mean, we have
But
seen,
we can't use that interest.
not today, and that's why under the report on June 4th, we're actually saying in future years we expect that the rate of return will be sufficient to offset some of the administrative costs. In the first 2 years, basically we're at, you know, right now we are receiving about 0.4%, so we hope that we'll get a better rate of return under the investments. But
Their
at this point,
investments are different, though.
right, I mean, they're out.
More like PERS investments, where they
Correct.
assume 6 3/4 or something.
Right, which
similar
definitely
to
affects
that.
your rate. I mean, your
Yeah.
premiums and so forth with rate. And one of the things that we'll be bringing back is that the investment committee work with the city manager to develop an investment strategy and so forth. So it is, we believe it will be more aggressive.
Okay.
Quick question. I'm reading the fiscal impact on this. Current year is $64,006. For 2013-14, it's $64,006. Are we going to continue paying that, say, in the 14-15 year as well? Is that
An annual,
so it's an annual payment?
amount, if you want to do it that way. Yeah. And it's actually a little bit more. I think based on the report I saw that finance has been working on, it's about 70,000. Because there's about 5,000 in administrative costs associated with establishing the plan and
Could you put in
managing the investments and.
Can you put it in a fund that's, can you put it in a fund that you could use in case of an emergency? Can you earmark? You can't do that. It has to be a,
I think in order to meet the obligation, the OPEB obligation, you have to set it up in a trust fund. Otherwise, you still have a disclosure on your financials.
Right. Some of the requirements are that it has to be set up in a trust that we cannot access.
Because they don't want future councils to go raid the piggy bank.
Right.
Yeah.
Use it for something else.
So even, you don't, so is it staff's recommendation to do the pre-funding?
Yes.
It is.
The only exception is we actually could get our money out of the plan, my understanding is if we leave CalPERS Health. and we no longer have that obligation, then at that point, we're able to pull the money out of the Parks Trust Fund. Is that accurate, Paula?
Yes, from what I understand.
So this is the fund buy part that came from getting CalPERS insurance.
Yes.
But then we.
But we knew that. I mean, we told the council at the
Right,
time,
right.
and we're saving a couple $100,000 a year. We're putting 65 grand back, so we're still saving
Right.
money.
Okay.
I do
No, I
that.
don't remember that.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, Barbara doesn't remember it either, so there.
Yeah, I think the two outstanding issues in June were the type of payment method that we would be using, whether it would be pre-funding or the pay-as-you-go, and then also to review investment options. So
what do you need from us?
Just some, I guess, direction or confirmation that we have the money in the budget. So if you're okay with doing the pre-funding option, then just, say that we're good and bring it back on the 4th. We'll give you, Finance has a report ready to go for recommendations for not investment options, but the plan options. Or if you want to do pay-as-you-go, then we need that direction tonight. That way we'll take that money out of the budget, free up that $130,000, and present the budget to you next week, and we won't bring back the PARS report.
Do you want me to make a motion on that, or is it just a consensus, or what?
Looks like their staff report requires a motion to approve the actuarial evaluation report.
You say it again?
That's one. And then
Actuarial.
second
Actuarial.
And the second one would be to provide direction.
Yeah.
I would like to make that motion. Do we need two motions?
Just the one.
So
Staff,
receive the report and then provide direction on pay-as-you-go or pre-funding.
I think we're at pre-funding, not pay-as-you-go.
I would
That would
say-
be my
Yeah,
motion.
I would second that.
Call for the vote, please, Liz. Vice Mayor Singleton?
Aye.
Councilmember Payne?
Aye.
Councilmember Campion?
Aye.
Councilmember Cruz?
Aye.
Mayor Powers? No. So I guess that's it. We're done.
Go home now.